From here, I just would like to say thank you to our international partners from Sustainable Brands, all our national partners like Ceres, ICOC, B Corp, Impact Hub, NESI, and Ceoe, and also to all collaborators. Additionally, I would like to say a big thank you to our sponsor, HP Graphic Arts, for this event, and then also to all our friends of Sustainable Brands, Brambles, Coke, Awara, amongst others. Also, thank you to all of you at home or at the office that are connecting to this event. Well, I'm really excited today because I think we do have amazing speakers for this afternoon. We'll have people like Interface, we'll have people like Tony Cioccoloni, HP Graphic Arts. Also, we have like some characters that are coming from abroad, like Andrew Winston, the famous author and global thought leader, who will share his latest project with Paul Polman, and Sally Uren, CEO of Forum for the Future. So please stay tuned, connect, relax, have fun, and stay with us. Before we start, you may know that at Ceoe, we are the first B Corp at the Ceoe, and we're in this amazing, actually, Ceoe auditorium. I don't know if you get to see it a bit, but it's an outstanding place. And for me, it's a pleasure now to introduce you to Marta Blanco, the president of Ceoe International. She would like to welcome all of you. And in fact, actually, Marta holds multiple positions. She's also the president of the International Relations Committee at Ceoe, vice president of business at OECD Trade Committee, and also the Spanish representative at G20 Empower. So welcome, Marta.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Spanish Confederation for Industries and Employers. Let me begin by thanking Ceoe and Sustainable Brands for the invitation to open this event. It is a privilege to take part of a debate with such relevant and distinguished speakers. And also, I want to thank the opportunity to make my own contribution about the challenges that sustainability will have in the coming years after the pandemic. My first comment is that I see a clear future, actually a promising future. It is not conceivable nowadays to define a strategy, an action plan, a roadmap without the sustainability as a key driver, but not only in the case of companies, but also in governments or in every public or private entity. Even I am sure that most of us have our particular agenda on sustainability. So the pandemic offers us the way to take advantage of the crisis and to generate new opportunities. But given that I represent here today the general business community approach, let me emphasize the role of that companies can play in order to move forward the sustainability agenda. And given also that I am president of Ceoe International, dealing with companies that have developed international strategies through export or investment, I will make a special reference about how companies that operate in international markets can contribute to overcome current challenges. And for doing that, I will follow the same methodology that Ceoe has provided us with. A methodology based on how sustainable development is going to evolve after the pandemic in 5 areas, in 5 dimensions: purpose, brand influence, innovation, supply chains, and governance, as Sandra has pointed out before. Needless to say that internationalization is not only a key strategy to overcome the economic crisis, but also a strong lever to disseminate the 17 SDGs all over the world. So going through the 5 dimensions to see what international companies can specifically do to address current challenges, let me begin by the first one, purpose. Spanish international companies have demonstrated their commitment to increase the social and environmental impact in the countries or regions they trade with or invest in. In this regard, very recently, a couple of weeks ago, we have organized a meeting with Business Europe precisely to give visibility to the impact that the Spanish companies are having in several countries in terms of sustainability. And we have learned about how they engage with local population and also with environmental local concerns. Going to the second dimension, brand influence, I think international companies can influence the development of common international standards regarding sustainability issues. Having common standards is of utmost importance. First of all, because it paves the way for Agenda 2030 with more transparency and accountability. But also because it guarantees the level playing field for companies that operate internationally. We, private sector, as often as we can, like to convey the message that we need international common standards shared by all the parties. Regarding the third dimension, innovation, in this regard I would say that a new paradigm has emerged. We said before the pandemic, we used to say that competitiveness and internationalization are two sides, or were two sides of the same coin. Now we are used to saying that internationalization and sustainability have to be two sides of the same coin. The more sustainable a company is, the more capacity it has to compete in international markets, and vice versa. The more international a company is, the more incentives it will have to be sustainable. So the result will be a reduction in terms of cost, and also the result will be to have access to a new partnerships, partners that will or that were unthinkable before the pandemic. Regarding the supply chains, if the pandemic has revealed something, it has been the disruption of global value chains. We need more resilient and efficient supply chains. Sustainable companies can contribute to achieve this objective, that's for sure. And finally, in terms of governance, the international companies have the potential to globally expand their impact and have also the potential to export sustainability. The more sustainable companies commit to internationalization, the faster 2030 agenda will be implemented. So to end my intervention, I would like to say that things are happening faster than before the pandemic. Companies have to take advantage of this new rhythm, addressing the challenges that are many, but also the opportunities that are also a lot. We are in a better situation now, a better mood, if I can use this word, and the biggest risk is to go back to the former normality without no change. So it is up to us, each of us, in the framework of our own responsibilities to positively address the challenges created by the pandemic. So congratulations once again for your work, for your initiative, and I wish you a fruitful discussion today.
Many thanks, Marta. What a nice introduction. See you soon. Well, we start the day today with interface, and let me remind you that we can think of Interface as that purpose-driven company for over 25 years, iconic in the sustainability world. So please just ensure you ask whatever you want, use the chat that you have available, and I'll try to make as much questions as possible. And also please feel free to use the hashtag of Sustainable Brands Madrid and also the one of Build Back Better. Actually, talking about Interface, in 1994, their founder Ray Anderson, declared already that Interface was committed to becoming the world's first environmentally sustainable and restorative company. That was back in 1994, which is right now impressive, no? And actually, you could also hear Emmanuel Faber a couple of years ago at Sustainable Brands Paris explaining how actually Interface inspired him so much to drive and to push the journey he pursued at Danone. No? And Interface has always been an inspiration to all of us who've been in this journey for so long. And for me, it's a super pleasure to have today in this opening talk Nigel Stansfield, President of Interface in Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. He will share how Interface is pioneering a climate movement through its climate take-back commitment, drawing on values-based leadership, lessons from nature, using carbon as a resource, and operating end-to-end transparency. And let me tell you briefly about Nigel. In his role, Nigel, he's responsible for setting and leading the company's growth strategy through the region. He's also leading personally this Interface climate take-back mission, focusing on reversing global warming and creating a positive impact on the environment. Nigel, it's a blast to have you here, actually. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Please go ahead. We listen to you.
I'm waiting actually to see that's what I'm waiting for, the presentation. Thank you. And thank you very much for the introduction, and everybody out there, welcome to my home. My name, as was said, is Nigel. I'm the president for Interface in our EAAA region. Essentially, it's all of the regions outside of the Americas. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about our business, and just allow me to just get used to this technology. So I'm looking forward to answering some questions at the end, but what I wanted to do to start with was basically to set the scene for you, to help you understand that I'm a material scientist. I'm a technologist by trade, and I grew up through the Interface organization in the supply chain, and manufacturing and R&D and innovation environments. And I'm here to talk to you about our company and our approach to business. And unlike many of you, or some of you on this call, I actually found my place in this purpose-driven company some 27 plus years ago, when the world was very, very different. And it's important to say that through these 27 years and 27 plus years of our journey, as we moved away from things like smokestacks and fossil fuel towards a much more restorative future, it's fair to say that we've had much success, but we've also, importantly, we've made some mistakes, but crucially, we've learned from those mistakes as we've gone down the journey. Now, some of you will probably know Interface, and certainly Interface has a big reputation in the sustainability world. But I wanted to give you a brief introduction of the organization just to level set everybody. We're $1 billion company, and we're a manufacturing company, and we manufacture commercial flooring, essentially carpet tiles, LVT and rubber that we supply across the globe. We are a very profitable organization, but we also are very supportive of the planet and our environment and sustainability missions. We have offices and manufacturing across the global footprint. We employ about 4,000 people, just over 4,000 people. The reason I mention this is sustainability is what Interface is recognized for, and we've spoken a number of times at places like Sustainable Brands, but we're still a very small company. And while I'm immensely proud about what we as a business have achieved in the last 27 years, and I've been very much involved in that throughout that journey, it does sadden me to see that there are still not more and more organizations like Interface taking a leadership position. Sustainability is at the heart of Interface and has been for many, many years. We were pioneers in sustainability over 25 years ago. You see a picture on the screen of our founder, Ray Anderson. We started then partnering with our customers and our suppliers to reduce our environmental impact. In fact, in 2020, in October, Interface was awarded a United Nations Global Climate Action Award in the category of Net Zero Now, in recognition of our sustainability efforts and our climate take-back mission, which I'll talk to you about. Our climate take-back mission, as was said earlier, it's our commitment to running a business in a way that helps reverse global warming and creates ultimately a climate that is fit for life. But part of our climate take-back mission, and one of the reasons I'm proud and pleased to be representing Interface on this call, is to make a call out to others to do the same and to join the journey to create a climate fit for life. Interface was the first global flooring manufacturer to ensure all its products across its entire portfolio were carbon neutral across the globe. We can even calculate the contribution a customer's purchase will make towards tackling global warming. And this year, we made a significant step forward. Interface launched our Embodied Beauty product range, which is our first ever carbon negative carpet tile on a cradle to gate basis. And it uses a new innovation that we're integrating into our products as standard, which is our Sequest bio-based backing. And we have a special backing system that goes on Embodied Beauty that helps us create this first ever carbon negative product for the flooring industry. We also complement that with our product take-back system. Now, Interface's re-entry program we launched in 1995, before circular economy was even discussed. And our commitment of our re-entry program is to take customers' used flooring back and use it in the most sustainable way possible. That's normally through things like reuse or repurposing, but ultimately can include recycling. So I want to talk a little bit now about our climate take-back mission. As we said earlier, this is our mission to run a business in a way that helps reverse global warming. Now, our first sustainability goal, we called Mission Zero. And Mission Zero was actually focused on doing less bad. It was actually focused on doing no more harm. Climate take-back sees us consider the next step, how we can be more positive as a business, how we can actually do more good. In fact, how can we become more regenerative? In other words, how can we help restore the planet? And as you can see on the screen, our plan consists of 4 strategic pillars. And it really boils down to simply this. Living Zero is our homage to our Mission Zero heritage. And it's about continuing to stop emitting and putting carbon into the atmosphere. The second pillar of climate take-back is to love carbon. Stop seeing carbon as an enemy and actually see carbon as a really important resource. The challenge with carbon is we've got excess carbon now in the atmosphere. Our third pillar in our climate take-back strategy is to let nature cool. Let's avoid getting in the way of the natural process that nature has developed over billions of years to take care of carbon in the atmosphere. Why can we not support that in the way we run our businesses, our factories, our operations? And the fourth pillar speaks to what I spoke about earlier about influencing change. How can Interface and others lead the industrial revolution, the next industrial revolution, by interrupting business as usual and making reversing global warming the most profitable way in the future of actually doing business? So I talked about carbon earlier. In our climate take-back strategy, carbon is a really key focus. You cannot help if you watch the news or listen to podcasts or when you're browsing social media. Everybody can see that climate change is a hot topic and it's happening now. It can often seem quite confusing, the nuances of climate change, the different science. But one thing that we all can agree upon is that there is simply too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that's what's causing global warming, which in turn is leading to climate change. Now, in response to this challenge of carbon emissions, many companies like ours and governments, they've made commitments on how they can play a role in the path to a net zero carbon future. Our focus at Interface is on using carbon as a fundamental building block in our products. But you can see from other organisations like HSBC, who have committed to net zero financed emissions by 2050, the Sky broadcasters, net zero by 2030, Unilever by 2039, Apple net zero by 2030. This is a hot topic for our customers. All of those people I listed are critical end users who buy and use our products. So our climate take-back strategy supports very much our customers and the direction that they're going in. We all have a lot to do. And I'm just going to talk you through some of the things that we've done at Interface to move forward on our progress towards a climate fit for life. So let me talk about our own path, our own journey to carbon negative. We take, as I said earlier, our cue from nature. We have been practitioners of biomimicry for many, many years. And we've learned how to work and use carbon in our engineering to make better products. We collect carbon and we store carbon in our new innovative backing systems, our Ceoe Bio, that prevents it from being released. We have the ability now to engineer this embodied carbon phase of the carbon life cycle to be negative in our products. We do this by working not just with materials, but that otherwise would have been released into an unwanted carbon cycle, similar to the way that plants decay and trees decay. We actually capture the carbon in our products and store it in our backings and preventing its release. When you add that to our improved manufacturing and our 25 years of sustainability and journey and knowledge, it results in the world's first negative embodied carbon footprint product that we launched, Embodied Beauty, in 2021. And this is the beginning for us, the beginning of the next phase of our journey to move to a carbon positive business. Now, we cannot control operational carbon, the usage of the product in its life, but what we can do is we can offset the impacts of this phase by supporting projects such as reforestation, renewable energy, and various other credit projects that can be used. And that has allowed us and helped us to bring our entire product portfolio to a carbon neutral status within the last few years. So every product you buy from Interface now is at minimum carbon neutral in its whole life cycle. And we've gone that one step further now with Embodied Beauty to deliver carbon negative products on a cradle to gate basis. All of that supports our ultimate goal of becoming a carbon negative enterprise by 2040, which I think once again sets Interface out ahead of the rest who are looking at carbon neutrality within the next 10 to 20 years, whereas Interface is moving one step beyond that into this carbon neutral future. Now, we can even now illustrate this with our customers. And to give you an example of what a purchase from a customer would look like and how that supports our brand and our future and our overall business profitability and sustainability. If a customer was to buy 25,000 square meters of one of our Embodied Beauty products with the new Ceoe Bio backing, on a cradle to gate perspective, it would be the equivalent of saving 7.5 metric tons of carbon emissions, which is about the equivalent of a 30,000 kilometre car journey or about 10 acres of carbon sequestered by a forest in 1 year. So even such a small component in the whole built space as carpet tile can be and is, it can still have a very significant impact in terms of sequestering carbon and controlling the atmosphere. And this is how we position this with our customers. It supports our customers' journey to a carbon neutral future or a carbon negative future. We also don't just consider our products when we think about impacts. Since the mid-1990s, we have been using a system that we call Ecometrics to measure and quantify effectively the metabolism of our operations. In other words, we look at how much we take in terms of material and energy, how much we make in terms of product, how much we waste in terms of raw materials, in terms of emissions. And we also consider, and have done since the 1990s, the carbon impact on our products. And as I said, we've been measuring this Ecometrics now, I think since 1997 was the first baseline that we set. And for a company, we have got many, many highlights now. Whilst, as I said earlier, many companies are now setting net zero goals for their operations and manufacturing and functions, in 2030 or 2040 or 2050. Interface has already reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by a whopping 96% since we set the baseline in the 90s. Across our manufacturing plants, we are already manufacturing using 75% renewable energy, renewable electricity, but also renewable gas as well. By working with our suppliers, we're using more recycled and more bio-based materials, and we're redesigning the way our products are made to eliminate that link to the oil well and that fossil fuel. And as a result of that, we've been able to reduce our carbon footprint of a carpet tile by 76%, which is again a huge achievement for a company. And almost 50% of our raw materials now are from recycled or bio-based sources. So, as I come to a conclusion on this, we are not just a company that thinks about products. I want to leave you with 3 thoughts before I open up this to wider questions from the group. There is no perfect single answer, but by fostering a culture of innovation and purpose within your organization, you can map a way forward to a brighter, better, higher quality of life in the future. Key to this is collaboration with your people and your customers, your suppliers, external experts, and in fact, other key stakeholders important to your business. Only through collaboration can you truly unlock the potential of your organization. Critically though, you must build resilience in your business now. You have to start taking action. Please do not wait until regulations change that mandate that you take action. Action is required now, and Interface and many other organizations have been on the front foot of that. The climate we live in today means that we have to act fast to weather the storms that we feel. And the businesses, I believe, that take the initiative and get ahead of this will be the businesses in the long run that remain sustainable and successful. So now it's over to you guys. What's your personal and business commitment to take back our climate? How will you and your colleagues make a positive change? With that, I'll close and I'll open up for questions.
Nigel, congratulations for your amazing work. You and your company are an inspiration to all of us, really. So thanks for that. Thanks for sharing it. And while the audience are writing some questions, I have 2 questions in the meantime, Nigel. The first one, if you can tell me, I'm curious because about the first time you mentioned internally in your employees, to your employees in your company, look, we are going to be net zero. We are going to be, later, carbon negative. We are going to be in a climate take-back mission. How did people react?
It's a really good question, and I'll answer that 2 ways. When we actually launched our climate take-back strategy, which was only in 2016, when we were already well on the journey to mission zero, by then, Interface had already embedded sustainability into our very fabric of our organization, our very DNA. So to make an announcement to a company that was well on the way to achieving mission zero, that the next mission was actually to go beyond zero and have a positive impact, was a very natural direction for us as an organization. However, in 1994, in August 1994, when Ray Anderson, our chairman and founder, stood up and said to the business, we're going to be neutral, we're going to have a zero impact, that was much more challenging, as you can imagine. In the 90s, there was no roadmap for sustainability. Sustainability was not language that was used in business. So it took quite some time for the organization to come to terms with what that meant, how that would look. And we didn't actually launch externally our Mission Zero commitment to have zero impact by the year 2020. We didn't make that commitment until the very end of the 1990s and the early part of this century. But the journey now, when you are a very purpose-driven organization and you've embedded sustainability in, it feels very natural for us in the organization to move from Mission Zero to Climate Take Back.
Wow, and another question, Nigel. Tell me a bit all the work you are doing about involving your stakeholders. How are you making it happen?
So internally within our organization, we're a very values-driven business, a very values and purpose-based organization. And we have really 4 key stakeholders: our employees, our customers, the environment, and obviously our shareholders and our investors. And value to the different stakeholders is very, very different. So to give you a couple of examples, for our employees, we operate various schemes to educate and train and develop people on things like sustainability and environment concerns, local to the environments where they live and work and operate, but also in the wider context of things like climate change. Obviously, our initiatives around creating carbon negative and carbon neutral products is very much customer driven, and to support the customers and some of the customers' underlying sustainability ambitions and strategies. All of this, leads to great brand reputation. It leads to high equity, if you like, with our stakeholders. It also leads to a much more resilient and robust business that people want to work for, people want to do business with, and investors want to invest in. You can imagine, if you think about the value proposition of a carpet tile company, there will not be many aspiring graduates leaving university looking to work in the flooring industry, in the manufacturing of carpet tile. But I can imagine that there are lots of those same graduates very much driven to work in a values-based, purpose-driven organization whose ambition is to reverse global warming. And that's a very key strategy for us.
For sure. I have one question coming, asking about the challenges you are facing now in this new mission. You were saying something before, no, about the learning from the doing, the learning from the mistakes, and I think that's very, very wise. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the challenges and how you are managing there.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one we often get asked. The reality is that not all of our customers are advocates of sustainability and the environment, and don't necessarily overtly support it. I mean, it may be more of a covert support for these kind of strategies. It's also that the marketplace has been very difficult, as you can imagine, over the last 18 months. And our business, about 50% of our global business is commercial office based. And the commercial office has seen some challenges through the COVID pandemic and is no doubt going to change moving forward. And you can see with that global pandemic that supply chains have become less stable and a bit more fractious. And we're seeing some challenges now around things like raw materials and supply chain. All of those are normal business things that people have to deal with. But when you're doing that in a way that is purpose-driven and you're driving towards reversing global warming, and you're looking for R&D and initiatives that can make carbon more resourceful, times like this, the last 18 months have certainly proved difficult. And I'm so immensely proud that Interface, we committed, as we started to go into this COVID crisis, that we were not going to slow down on our investment in innovation and R&D and development of new product and design. We were going to continue to do that, and we have passionately gone at that. And through the pandemic, we've made some significant changes to the way we present our products in the market, not least of which is the launch of Embodied Beauty and the carbon negative product. And that itself internally presents challenges when you've got the dynamics of a challenging economic environment, and yet you still want to maintain a leadership position. So all of those are the dilemmas that we face in the organisation.
Thanks for that. That was a nice insight. And finally, Nigel, one more. Would you tell us a bit more about the fit of your purpose with your mission of carbon negative? Tell us a bit more about your purpose. You've mentioned it, but if you could share a bit more on that.
Yeah, so internally in our organisation, organisations have purpose and missions and vision statements, and that's not at all uncommon. But as a business, when we were thinking about what's beyond Mission Zero, what's next, the stark reality that we're all faced with at the moment is that doing no more harm is just simply no good anymore. There have to be some businesses out there that can have a positive impact on the environment, because there will not be enough businesses, in my view, doing no more harm going forward. So it was a very natural progression for us to think about what's beyond no more harm. How can we become an ambassador for regenerative business, for true sustainability? And that naturally led to, you think about where your biggest impacts are as an organisation. For Interface, the biggest impact we have is through our supply chain and in our manufacturing. About 2/3 to 3/4 of our greenhouse gas impact is in our supply chain. So it was natural to continue to focus on that and start to bring products out that had a positive impact on the environment or had a carbon negative footprint. And so that's the progression that we've made. We succeeded and delivered our Mission Zero commitments, and we published a detailed dossier on that on our website in 2019, and our commitment now is to become a carbon negative business without the need for any offsets by the year 2040. And Embodied Beauty sets us well on the way for that, and it's the beginning of a series of changes that the world will see from Interface as we move to a more restorative, regenerative business, building a climate fit for life.
Nigel, I'm sure you're going to get there, I'm sure. Listening to you, I don't have any doubt. So I think you touched almost all 5 dimensions in just one speech, but it was super nice to hear about your innovation work, your brand influence work as well, your purpose. Nigel, please come back whenever you want, and the best of luck for everything you do.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Take care. Well, we are now going to talk about supply chain a bit more. Supply chain as a multiplier. In the new paradigm, supply chain acts as a fundamental lever for creating positive impact and building greater levels of transparency. The supply chain must serve not only within its area of direct influence, but it must also extend its ambition beyond the natural boundaries to target systemic change by establishing new alliances with Tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers. The ultimate goal for the supply chain is to become regenerative and human-centered. And for this session, I'm super happy to introduce you to 2 very special people. The first one is Sally Uren. Sally, she's CEO of... Hi, Sally. That's fantastic to see you there. Sally is the CEO of Forum for the Future. Sally oversees Forum for the Future's mission to accelerate a big shift towards a sustainable future by catalyzing transformational change in global systems And this involves working with global businesses and memberships organizations like the United Nations Global Compact. She's a regular speaker at international conferences, and she writes for a number of publications. She's also an independent advisor on different advisory boards like Kimberly-Clark or Burberry. Good to see you, Sally. And then we have Inzo as well. Hi. Hi, Sally. How are you?
Very well. Great to see you.
Good to see you back. And then let me introduce you as well to Inzo van Zanten. Inzo, how are you? Good to see you back as well.
Good. Yes, great to be here again.
Inzo is Tony's Choco evangelist. He tells the story and the huge mission of Tony Chocolonely towards 100% slave-free chocolate. And Inzo, as you will see, combines his talents as an economist, author, entrepreneur, and storyteller in his work for Tony's. No? In the past, actually, he was also responsible for launching the successful smoothie brand Innocent Drinks on the European continent. And he's also convener of the Sustainable Leadership and Entrepreneurship Program at the Amsterdam University and a guest lecturer at the University of Amsterdam and TU Delft. Well, Tony's, as you may know, isn't your average company of chocolate. It's a chocolate company with a mission that is huge. And I think the best thing we can do is just go and talk to them. And Inzo, I start with you. I see that a lot has happened at Tony's Chocolonely since we saw each other physically at Sustainable Brands 2018, no, here in Madrid. Yeah. Could you share with us how you have become one of the fastest growing chocolate brands in the UK, in the US and Germany, and how are you balancing this growth, this expansion with your purpose and your mission?
Well, yes, I would almost say in blunt Dutch, we've grown like crazy. We've had quite a successful launch in the UK in the meantime, where now almost a quarter of our business comes from. And we're available in, I think, over 30 countries already, launching in Australia now. We just launched in Japan during COVID. But honestly, I don't think it's a question of balancing that with purpose. I think it's because there's such a clear purpose. I think what consumers want is really a product that is speaking for, well, taking responsibility within your value chain as a company, and where you as a consumer can be part of a movement of a change for good within a complete industry that we, well, in Western society almost consume daily, right? Chocolate. So I don't think it's a balance, and I'm a strong advocate of that always, that it's not about sustainability versus profitability. I think if you let go of those two things being a paradox, then you can really reach great heights and become indeed, say, market leader in the Netherlands. And maybe, well, I wouldn't be so pretentious to say that we're a global brand, but at least we're becoming a globally available chocolate brand quite quickly.
And I see. We'll talk later. And Sally, I wanted to ask you first of all, what's your view on the social side? No, when trying to deliver net zero objectives, no, why is it so important to deliver on the social side when trying to deliver the net zero objectives?
Of course. First of all, though, I'm very happy that Tony's Chocolonely is in the UK. So thank you for that. Very happy to see them on the supermarket shelves. Your question is, why is it so important to deliver the social side of net zero? And the simple answer is that if we don't think about issues around structural inequality, around equity, as we plot our pathway to net zero, if net zero is purely a numbers game, purely a carbon gain, then actually we will have billions of people that won't have access to basic needs. And that's not sustainability. Sustainability is about driving a just and regenerative future, a future that allows people and the planet to flourish. And so the social dimension is inextricably linked to the environmental dimension. And that's why I think we need to be talking about net zero plus. It has to include the social dimension. Otherwise, we are not going to create the conditions in which people will be able to flourish.
Very clear. Inzo, when we speak about end-to-end transparency, no? Realizing end-to-end transparency in the supply chain requires openness, trust, collaboration. How do you ensure bean-to-bar transparency of your cocoa supply chain? And most importantly, maybe, if mistakes do happen, because I guess that everybody can make a mistake, no? Even you. How should companies communicate bad news? No? I mean, we are very afraid, no, of being transparent, really, and you are doing very well there.
I think there's two answers to that. One is really about building long-term relationships on the ground. So we have very strong and direct relationships with the cooperatives that we work with. There are 7 now in Ghana and Ivory Coast, in which more than 8,500 farmers are united. And that's really about building long-term relationships that hardly any chocolate manufacturer actually really does its best to create, which is strange enough. But then over due course, we really started building those systems as well. So we built a system that's called the Bean Tracker, that really gives us total transparency of all the cocoa beans, indeed bean to bar, as you said, from farmer level up to the batch level in the chocolate factory. And having that system in place really gives us complete transparency. So that's the really quantifiable part of the answer to give. And what do you do when something goes wrong? I think full transparency. Radical transparency throughout your value chain, throughout your communication about how things go. And we fortunately haven't had any issues in that field over the last few years, but at a certain point in our early years, we ran into the issue that we were growing so fast that we had to decide between letting go of the complete traceability part of our beans at a certain point, or just not going on shelves for a couple of months, because we wouldn't be able to produce. And we explained to our consumers why we chose to then take the untraceable cocoa beans, use those to remain on shelf, and we simply explained that. So I think a bit of humbleness and openness and transparency towards your consumers is something that they will only understand and embrace even more.
Humbleness and radical transparency, that's really, those are really big words. Okay, and going to Sally now. Sally, I mean, you were speaking, no, before, and I was listening to you, and it's so obvious, no, all what you were saying, and it was so clear what you said, no. It's all about having a supply chain that it's human-centered, no, but we need to hear that, because it's true that we are all the time speaking about net zero, and the social side is even, I would say, kind of disappeared sometimes. And I think it's a great reminder, no, you did for us. But I wanted to ask you, what is for you the difference between a regenerative supply chain and a sustainable supply chain? We already heard Interface this morning speaking about regeneration. No? We are going to speak a lot about this word today. So what's the difference for you, including, of course, all the social side that we cannot forget?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's fair to say that there isn't a regenerative supply chain out there at the moment. It very much is a direction of travel, a statement of ambition. We have flashes of sustainable supply chains out there. So by a sustainable supply chain, I mean supply chains that are resilient. They are capable of continuity. So sustainability means the capacity for continuance in the broadest sense. We might see supply chains that are headed towards net zero, some supply chains that might be circular. These are attributes of a sustainable supply chain. But the differences for me between sustainable and regenerative, I actually had 2 differences as you were asking your question, but I'm going to add a third, because I think that Enzo is right. So let me start with the reconfiguring of the systems in which the supply chain is nested. So for example, a lot of energy around regenerative agriculture right now. At Forum for the Future, we have a couple of projects, one in the US, one in the UK, looking at what it means to scale regenerative agriculture. And the difference between a regenerative agricultural supply chain and a sustainable one is that those supply chains are working towards a different set of goals for the ag system, a set of goals that have got really understanding about how to replenish biodiversity, how to build farmer livelihoods, are in effect a shift from a system that's quite extractive. Many supply chains extract value, societal, economic value, certainly environmental value. The shift here is to systems that are actually regenerative. So a big difference for a regenerative supply chain is a supply chain that's really actively part of a reconfigure of the broader system. And that is beginning to happen in the regenerative agricultural space. But the other big difference, and this is really hard, the other big difference is that purchasing practices and business models have shifted to put the desire to drive structural inequality to a different outcome at their heart. And increasingly, we're talking about how do we decolonialize our supply chains? The supply chains that we have today in many of our global commodities were conceived centuries ago and were based upon a very uneven power dynamic in our society. So a regenerative supply chain is actively working to redistribute value, to drive equity of all aspects in the supply chain, and has got a fundamentally different business model and a fundamentally different approach to purchasing, long-term value creation, value distribution, and has got the principles of decolonialization at their heart. So really, really, really ambitious. It is where we needed to be headed. And I think some might say, well, that sounds really ridiculously ambitious, but I would say, if we don't shoot for the stars, then we're not going to drive the radical change that we need to see. And supply chains right now need radical overhaul, radical transformation. Too often, not in the case of Tony's Chocolonely, they just work for the few. Supply chains actually involve the many, and they need to work for the many. And the many is both people and is the planet.
Thanks for that, Sally. That was very, very insightful. Inzo, I'm just thinking about what Sally said, no? And to achieve your mission, no, of eradicating slavery in the cocoa supply chain, of course, requires collective action, that system change, no? Can the efforts of one company, even if it's Tony's Chocolonely, lead a global movement that changes the entire system?
The short answer, yes.
How?
Well, I'm convinced of that, right? If you look at how in the last 15 years, but especially in the last 6 or 7 years, we created so much traction, and honestly, I think the impact a company like Tony's is making is bigger than the amount of cocoa beans that we're purchasing. It's really about changing an industry from within. And initially, we had the bold idea that maybe we should get about 100% market share to change that system. Well, we let go of that idea quite soon and realized that we should aim at changing 100% of the market to start doing what we're doing. So that's really taking full responsibility for your complete value chain, creating long-term relationships, paying a fair price for the products that you buy from these farmers in Western Africa, helping them increase the productivity and the quality that they deliver, and helping them have a strong stand in that value chain indeed. And exactly like Sally said, it's really about decolonization of the complete value chain there. And how? I think by creating a product that people probably were longing for all along, right? A nice indulgent product where there's no bitter aftertaste once you realize and once you become aware of the bitter reality behind that sweet story of chocolate. And people can be part of that change by simply making a different purchase decision. Because in the end, there was this wise meme that I read last year on the internet that said, if you want them to stop producing crappy stuff, then simply stop buying crappy stuff. And we create awareness amongst those consumers that every purchase decision they make is a vote for the world they want to live in them. They want to live in them. They want to live in them. They want to live in them.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Inzo, and please also tell us how you've managed to achieve such a powerful branding, especially in North Europe. with no advertising investment. That's for the marketeers that are listening to us. So if you can share a bit more about that. Hi, Enzo. I was just asking, Enzo, while we solve the technical side, Enzo, I was just thinking that how you managed to achieve such a powerful branding, especially in North Europe now, no? But coming soon to us as well here, with no advertising investment at all, because you don't do any. And I see you everywhere, that's true, but I see you everywhere, but no advertising investment. Just a brief insight for the marketeers in the audience. No. Okay, Sally, I'm going to come back to you while we sort out Enzo's. Sally, when we speak about regeneration, you were mentioning it before, no? We definitely speak about business model innovation.
Yep.
Would you share with us the main highlights of your project Cotton 2040? Because when I saw that, I was amazed, no? And the objectives of that project are really fully regenerative, no?
Well, the objective of the project is to try and make sustainable cotton the norm. We want to
not
do
yet,
that first.
Not yet, but a good start, no?
Yeah, I think that would be a great start, because cotton, like many commodities, has lots of really challenging environmental and social issues to contend with. And one of the tracks of activity within Cotton 2040, which is a multi-stakeholder collaboration that we convene at Forum, involving the sustainable cotton standards, brands, retailers, growing communities. One of the big levers for change is business models. We know from talking to procurement teams that there's only so far you can get without actually rewiring the business model. So within that track of activity within cotton, along with our partners at WRI, we've been trying to understand, so what are the different options for business models that we might think about trialing and then scaling within the cotton industry? And there are many. I think we've got about 10 different business models, but I wanted to share with you 4 today because I think they've got broader applicability. The first is already beginning to happen, and that's a business model whereby we're able to drive value creation at producer level through ecosystem services. If we think about the massive rise in nature-based solutions, this is a real opportunity to create financial flows into particularly smallholder farmers and just create a different business model where actually the business model is predicated from keeping the ecosystem there, from building biodiversity. So value creation through ecosystem services is one. The second is also something you can see experimentation with today, and that's direct trade models. So business models with very few or no intermediaries. And this is particularly enabled by tech at the moment. Lots of examples of farmer communities using tech to trade directly. That's another alternative. The third alternative, and we haven't quite figured out how this might work, but it's a whole landscape-based approach. We often think about business models that work for cocoa that's being grown alongside tea, being grown alongside another commodity. And I think there's huge merit in thinking about what is the business model that would drive value creation in a landscape. So investment vehicles for whole landscapes, I think, is really worth exploring. And then the fourth business model is linked but slightly different, which is what are those new financial mechanisms that will perhaps help in cotton farmers invest in the transition from conventional to organic farming? So there might be new trade agreements, there might be new contracting agreements, there might be new insurance products. But where are there opportunities for financial instruments to, in particular, finance the transition from conventional ag to regenerative ag? And in other words, therefore, there are these different types of business models out there. What we need to do is to validate them, and then we need to scale them, because all of the 4 I've just outlined could be part of a regenerative supply chain.
That's super interesting because we always speak about innovation, yeah, but usually we are only working at product service level, and it's true, no, that business model innovation is is the one that is going to take us further. No? Yeah, thanks for that, Sally. We'll follow on that. Inzo, you are back there?
I hope so. Do you hear me?
Hello, yes, we hear you perfectly.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, Inzo, I was asking you, I was curious about your powerful branding, no? All what you've achieved with no advertising, especially in North Europe, but I'm sure that soon here as well is in South Europe and in other places. I mean, how are you managing for marketeers? How you've achieved with no advertising that branding?
Well, honestly, it was born out of necessity. We simply didn't have any marketing budget because we didn't have the money. So then you become creative.
That doesn't work always, eh? I'm telling you, it doesn't work usually.
No, but then you have to combine perhaps an amazing product with an amazing purpose, and then it rolls by itself. So our salespeople always say our product sells itself. I always use that against them, by the way. But after a while, we realized that telling that story, the story of the cocoa industry is very complex. It takes more than 20 seconds. It takes more than one ad somewhere. And we realized that quite quickly. And still today, 50 years down the road, it's very complex to explain to the people, even the differences between child work, child labor, illegal child labor, modern slavery, etc. So it simply takes a bit longer. So we really believe in creating long-term relationships also with consumers. So I try to sometimes say when I teach students that we skip brand awareness and go straight to brand loyalty by really explaining this whole story of what we're aiming at. And if you do that, if you try to cover a very serious subject like modern slavery, like illegal child labor, but you manage to do that in a fun way, in an appealing way, and slightly stick to your guns when it comes to the way we create things, right? We were the first one with kind of a rainbow feel on shelf instead of golden baroque arches and shiny wrappers. And it stood out. It stood out from its simplicity. I think the way we communicate stands out from its simplicity. It's a serious subject, it's a complex subject. By making that simple and literally edible by consumers, then I think you differentiate yourself, and then it's fun to see competitors start to copying you, and that's fine. It's only a confirmation of that we're on the right path.
I wanted to ask Sally as well, because she was telling us about the cocoa example, about the cotton example. Sally, let's say that we are a company who would like to move towards a regenerative supply chain. Where should a company start from, a standard company?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there are 3 steps that need to be taken, and they are sequential. The first is really obvious, but we sometimes forget about this, and that is you need to be compliant. And so you need to know what's happening in tier 4 of your supply chain. What is the human rights story in the tier of the supply chain that you can't see? Just as Inzo was saying, you need to understand that. And many companies still don't have that understanding. They don't have line of sight of what's happening down their supply chain. So there's no way you can embrace this notion of regenerative if you don't have line of sight all the way through your supply chain. So being compliant is, particularly on the social issues, is something that shouldn't be taken for granted. Once you have that compliance, then my next step would be diagnose. In your supply chains, where are those opportunities for you to influence the system around you to create really big positive change? Now, that might be through restoring soil health. It might be through encourage adoption of agricultural practices that improve soil health. That in turn builds the capacity of the soil to act as a carbon sink. You're then making a contribution to solving climate. Soil health improves nutritional quality of crops. So when you think about your supply chain, think more about how does my product move through my supply chain, through where is my supply chain? Where are those opportunities to drive really big systemic change? Soil health is such a brilliant example there, but community empowerment is another example. Those leverage points in your supply chain that in turn will create these nested impacts. And then I think the third step that I would really advocate is you're going to have to reconfigure your approach to finance and risk. You need a higher appetite for risk tolerance if you're really serious about regenerative agriculture, regenerative practices, because we don't know quite exactly how to do this. So how do we reconfigure financial flows so we do risk some of these practices? We invest in switching smallholder production techniques. We really think about the whole financial flow through the whole supply chain and start to rewire it. That might be thinking more about long-term value returns. It might be different contracting structures. And so at its heart, I think the move to regenerative supply chains is about creativity. It is about ambition, as Inzo has just been saying. And it's about ingenuity. It's about accepting that these structures that have been laid down for decades and decades and decades, they aren't working. So how can we reconfigure them to make them work? So compliance, diagnosis, reconfiguration. I don't know why everyone else isn't doing this.
It's very easy, Sally. I don't know why we are not doing it. I think it's a great invitation, a great legacy for anybody working in a business, a marketeer, or anybody, a manager. I mean, what a nice legacy, no? To work for. Inzo, I wanted to ask you a bit more about regenerative farming that can significantly enhance production yields. How do you envisage regenerative practices being implemented by cocoa farmers? Could you share all the benefits that these practices could bring to those farmers?
Yeah, well, for example, we're working together with farmers to help them plant shade trees, which is essential in the cocoa industry and definitely now with climate change. And we help them do composting on their farms, which also in itself takes down the temperature of the whole plantation in itself if you do that right. And this is something that we're working strongly with these farmers directly. But it's also about helping them change their farming practices. Right? This has been the same kind of farming practices for the last decades, if not centuries. And it's helping them in that field as well.
I'm asking you both now. It's all about a mindset change, no? I would say when I'm listening to you, no? I mean, of course, many things need to be done differently, no? But if we don't do that mindset shift, no, it gives the impression to me that it will never happen, no? How do you see? How do you see it? These paradigms of regenerative supply chains that are dominating most of our thinking right now. It's all about a mindset shift, really. Then how we can ensure that human rights and slavery are not lost in the transition to this net zero economy? For you both.
Want to go first, Sally, or want me to take it?
Why don't you take it?
No, what you're saying, mindset, and I would like to combine that with the last thing that Sally said, which is why is not everybody doing it, right? Because it makes so much sense. And I think this is exactly our approach. We want to show them that you can be commercially very successful, but at the same time being impactful. So realizing that financial success isn't an end goal, but it's an essential mean. Don't get me wrong, we're commercial as hell. But financial success in itself isn't an end goal. It's a means towards a goal, right? For us, that's 100% slave-free chocolate. So this is really about a mindset shift, maybe. This is also why I really oppose us being called a social enterprise. I haven't called ourselves a social enterprise in ages. Why? Because you put yourself in a niche of entrepreneurship instead of setting yourself up as the new norm of entrepreneurship. I think those entrepreneurs that don't take their moral obligation towards the planet and the society seriously, that don't see that financial success is a means towards a goal instead of a goal in itself, we should start calling those anti-social entrepreneurs, anti-social enterprises, and simply resetting that mindset, as you said. It's really about reframing what you are and what you're about. So this is not social entrepreneurship, what we're doing. This is entrepreneurship versus anti-social entrepreneurship.
I'm with you, Enzo. I'm with you.
Yeah, and just to echo why mindset shift is so important. If you look at how systems shift, if you look at how deep transformation happens, one of the key ingredients is personal values, personal beliefs, the narratives, the stories we tell ourselves. And in some ways, the COVID crisis has helped us in this regard, because the mindset that underpins regenerative and just is a mindset that says, you know what? Planetary health equals human health equals economic health. All of these three things are completely interlinked. And the mindset then moves from a mindset of, oh, I can't do this, it's too expensive, to actually, how do I really celebrate these links and have a mindset of abundance and a mindset of possibility, rather than this is just something else I'm supposed to do. But it starts with that understanding the fundamental interconnectivity. We can't have a healthy planet without healthy people, and we for sure can't have a healthy economy without healthy people and a healthy planet. And the sooner we internalize that interconnectivity, all of us, particularly those key decision makers in business and brands, the sooner we'll accelerate our progress to that goal of a socially just and regenerative future, because that's where we need to be shooting for.
Hear, hear.
I like that moonshot word, no? At the end, we are making moonshots, yeah. And Sally, I know you work hard on system change, no? On systems change. I know you have your own model. I've learned a lot from you on that side. I don't know if you want to show any learning from that could help us in this trip to regeneration from sustainability. I know you have a very strong and solid model, but maybe you could give us a couple of headlines for today, so we'll leave it there with you.
Sure. Yeah, the shift that we need to see to regenerative supply chains is a systemic shift. It is a shift in the system. And I think there are probably two things to leave you with. It does need a mindset shift. It does need a shift in values, behaviors. It is an individual shift. There's no escaping that at all. But the second thing I'd leave you with, it's not one thing. All of our work, which tells us how systems shift, really tell us it's a combination of innovation, entrepreneurship, new access to finance, different financing mechanisms, policy change, new narratives. So if you hear someone say, I'm going to shift a system by doing this one thing, you need to just gently say, what else are you going to do? Because actually systems shift when you pull multiple levers at multiple points in time, which is why in the end, it is the biggest collaboration challenge we're going to have to get our heads around as we think about the pathway to 2030.
Wonderful. And Inzo, would you share with us like the most incredible moment you've had at Tony's, where you felt that, yeah, I'm sure that in a brand like that, I mean, you must have like really incredible stories, no? One of the moments that for you were more amazing based on your purpose, your mission. And then also to finish, I would like to ask you, what would you say to all those marketeers, storytellers, like you in a way, that are in maybe big companies? Which message would you like to leave for them? Because you are an incredible seller of a very nice brand. So what message do you want to leave?
So I didn't come prepared for this one.
That's good.
I think one of the most amazing moments was only a couple of years ago when I started realizing that people were seeing us as an example. You always used to hear, we want to become the Uber of, or we want to become the Peerby or the Airbnb of. And now all of a sudden I hear students and entrepreneurs on conferences or startups say, we want to become the Tony Chocolonely of. And that means to me that we're inspiring more than just the cocoa industry, which I think is great. And it also humbles me because we're nothing yet. We're a speck in the ocean. We're a drop if you look at the total amounts of cocoa beans sourced in Western Africa, we don't even show up in the stats. And what I would like to tell marketeers, or just about anybody working on mission, vision, purpose, the why, whatever you want to call it, or whatever hype you put on it, is something that I learned from a friend of mine who's often seen at sustainable brands as well. It's Thomas Kolster, a Danish guy.
Yeah, Thomas, our friend.
Yeah, and Thomas always emphasized the fact that brands need to realize that it's not about them. It's about your consumers. It's about who can you help your consumer become? How can you make them the change maker, the movement maker within their environment, within their lives, instead of pointing at yourself as a brand, looking at us doing amazing stuff, right? And I think that's something for marketeers to take away. It's not about going out 2 days to an expensive hotel and find your purpose and then do all sorts of marketing activities on that. No, it's about marketing to reach your purpose and not the other way around.
Definitely, you know, Nigel from Interface was as well telling us, no, about please go and do activate, no? That's all about activation of purpose, no? Not about having a cool purpose in return, no? Well, you two are amazing, guys. I mean, you've talked about confident end-to-end transparency in the supply chain, a human-centered supply chain, the importance of that, just basic. You spoke about the alliances, a potential with farmers and the other examples. We spoke about business model innovation with Sally as well, super interesting, the work on the cotton side. And we spoke about the meaning really of regeneration. Please come back soon, you two. I want to see you face to face this time.
I'd love to.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Take care, my friends. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Well, hope you enjoy Inzo and Sally. They are both amazing. And now we are going to talk a bit more about innovation. We've already talked about that quite a lot. But looking at the new paradigm of innovation based on our research, sustainability is a key driver of all future innovations, no? We already talked about LCA, the cycle diagnostics interface. Nigel talked about that. And we talk about how LCA cycle diagnostics can be used to refocus really innovation efforts. In this new paradigm of innovation, also bottom-up experimentation and co-creation coming from consumers is basic. The circularity is based as well on a mindset shift, and impact investment is practiced to put capital at the service of people and planet, and both Inzo and Sally spoke about that as well. So for me now, it's a pleasure to hand over to Jose Gorbea. He's Global Head of Brands and Agencies Innovation of HP Graphic Arts. And he's going to share with you how HP is being a catalyst for brands to enable them activation, which is so important right now. No? HP digital printing actually enables the circularity, reduces package waste, and reduces global warming, allowing as well brands to be closer to communities. And just let me tell you that Jose is a passionate marketeer and a thought leader. He's a keynote speaker. I've seen him already, with a strong track record on revitalizing brands by inspiring teams to deliver breakthrough brand strategies and award-winning campaigns through co-creation, sustainability, and personalization at scale. And before HP, Jose led for more than 20 years many well-established brands as Kit Kat, Crunch, Cadbury, Milka, Philadelphia, Trident, and many others. So definitely a very strong marketeer. A pleasure, Jose.
Pleasure, Sandra. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thanks for being here.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. It's a pleasure to be here at Sustainable Brands Madrid for the very first time. And now we're going to take you through a journey on the value of HP's digitally printed packaging value proposition to help brand owners accelerate their sustainability transformation journey. So the next few slides, I hope that they inspire you to do better marketing. I think what we heard from Sandra and Inzo on Tony's Chocolonely, which is a great case study that really inspires me personally, is that every other brand has that type of thinking, that type of mindset to regenerate the ecosystem around them, and most importantly, work with people to make and drive that change. So as we go along this journey, we hope to not only educate the audience, but most importantly, inspire you to co-create with us in this journey. So as we go along, one of my favorite statements comes from Ratan Tata, who is one of the founders of Tata Motors in India and one of the most, influential members of that country and community in driving change and also sustainable change. And he talks all about walking together. And I really want to make emphasis on this point, because as we can see how brands are doing marketing these days through digitally printed packaging, co-creation is one of those words that we really want you to remember from these 10 minutes that I have here to share a few messages with you. That is the one thing that will help us drive effective, sustainable behavior change for good, for better, and hopefully we can partner as we go forward with more and more of you. So very quickly, we know packaging is a big issue in the planet. It's huge. And, I work at HP Graphic Arts, and, we make a living through printing digitally, packaging, and many other things. But we also make a living by doing it responsibly. Actually, if all brands in the planet would be using digitally printed packaging, we would have the power to reduce 30% of packaging waste across the supply chain. Sandra today was talking a lot with her hosts, around a regenerative supply chain. I don't think you can have a regenerative supply chain if you don't use digitally printed packaging as part of your supply chain strategy. So we invite you to really think about this, because when you extrapolate a number like that, we could basically remove about 15 million tons of plastics from the planet, just by switching to this great technology and what it has to offer. And the other thing is, in combination with great marketing strategies that disrupt consumers across different locations, different regions, because we know that sustainable marketed products are growing much faster than the rest of the market, because clearly that's where human beings want to move. And if brands, governments, and society is not moving at that same speed, it's going to be a real struggle to achieve change and address our climate crisis. As we all know from partnering with sustainable brands for the last couple of years at HP Graphic Arts, they have their own framework around the 9 most sustainable behaviors. And the beauty of digitally printed packaging, it has the power to impact all of those 9 behaviors across society, across climate, and across preserving resources for life. We're going to show you how very quickly this actually happens. So the journey of adoption of digital print in your supply chain is important to recognize that, it's not necessarily something you can adopt overnight. There's a sequence, there's a specific sequence you need to go through as a brand on understanding the benefits of the technology, which as a starting point is great to manage short-run printing. All of those low-volume products that are either local or just relevant in a specific region or location are the best ones to start your digital print packaging journey. Why? Because you're going to save money, you're going to innovate faster, and you will learn how to adopt this technology in your supply chain. But the real trick and the real benefit comes in the second step, which is how you expand that footprint in your supply chain to drive impact, to drive sustainable impact and accelerate your sustainability innovation journey. And that has to do with 2 main benefits: removing 30% of packaging waste and reducing significantly global warming impact. We have done a life cycle assessment study of our technology with a third party, and we've proven versus analog printing that we can reduce global warming impact somewhere between 65 to 80%. That's a massive reduction that if you work as partners with global companies where they print thousands of tons of packaging every year, just by using digitally printed packaging, they can have a real impact in the planet in that part of their marketing mix. And last but not least, the third point has to do with marketing precisely. As we heard from Tony's Chocolonely, they have a very disruptive and relevant, purpose-led model that is using marketing through the power of packaging, not through the power of above-the-line communications. But what we do is we focus on the power of packaging to personalize it, to disrupt the marketplace, and most importantly, co-create consumer stories, because everybody has a sense of belonging, and we love empowering that. And we have proven through a research we just recently announced a couple of weeks ago in partnership with WARC, that your marketing ROI can actually double when you focus on digital printed packaging and the storytelling behind it, because co-creation is a very powerful driver of change. And why is that? Personalization is a trend that is growing dramatically. The younger the generation, the more they want it. And the value of the market is $150 billion. And 70% of people in shopping mode are actually paying at least a 10% premium price for a personalized product. So clearly, it adds a lot of value in a marketing strategy, because we all know the era of one size fits all is more than over. And that's what we have harnessed at HP in our brands innovation community. We've done a research where we've analyzed more than 50 million conversations on social media on the trend of personalization. We have become subject matter experts in this trend to relevantly connect personalized storytelling to consumers and empower the brands that we work with to be catalysts, to make them tell purpose-led stories that have to do with sustainability, but making sure that they are relevant using the right consumer language and the right emotional drivers behind it, which is very nicely embodied in that HP personalization pinwheel, which is our exclusive consumer-led framework on how to talk about personalization. And within that, mindful materialism on your top left, the green territory, is the one that actually where we discovered the intersection between personalization and sustainability. Personalization is a very strong amplifier of sustainability storytelling. As you can see by one of the examples of what we've created, this one was done with Danone. In Denmark, we created 3.2 million one-of-a-kind pieces of art on these bottles from Ecuador, where they grew sales by close to 70% the first 2 weeks, because the whole experience of shopping, finding these bottles, sharing the stories of the artist who created them was unique in different touch points, in different locations, and every consumer got their one-of-a-kind bottle. It drove a lot of anticipation to the experience, a lot of shareability on social media, and it clearly adds a lot of value creation across the consumer journey. But the most important point is, once a consumer possesses and has something that is one of a kind and personalized, they keep it. They don't throw it to the trash. So that is a behavior that we love keeping, because people will help us, avoid creating more waste, which we all don't need in the planet. We have done research that shows through the Cannes Lions community and their effectiveness code that actually packaging is the second most effective communication channel for brands, even above social media. It's a great complement for your marketing communication strategy, and that's where we want to play a much stronger game, because we know it works. Like the example of having a transparent supply chain with Melinda Apples in Italy. We co-created 4,000 farmer stories across 3 million boxes to tell the users and the consumers of these wonderful brands in Italy where the apples come from and who are the people specifically taking care of those apples, growing double digit with this campaign. The other thing is that digital print is very strong on increasing your sales, and most importantly, as I said, doubling your marketing ROI. Out of the research we did, we have proven that actually it's a much effective marketing strategy. Like we see here with Hershey's. Hershey's co-created hundreds of stories with women influencers on Women's Day in Brazil to make consciousness around gender equality and the macho culture that they needed to overcome. It drew their sales, they grew their sales by 6 times and really punched above their weight through this type of strategy. You can see the social impact that you can achieve through personalization and co-creation is much, much stronger. So the last thing I'll say, co-creation is king, and clearly user-generated content and participation is the one thing that digital print allows you to do much better than any other marketing touchpoint. And that drives emotion and storytelling. Like we see with this wonderful condoms brand in the US, where teenagers are not using condoms very often, but through co-creation, this brand called Naughty Bags created stories for teenagers to use this product in the right moment and avoid, health problems, health issues, or family issues that we all don't want. The last thing I'll say is the long-term strategy. Amarula is a brand that was a pioneer in digital print. They worked with us in creating 400,000 unique bottles to save elephants from poaching in Africa and protect a species from extinction. And other brands have learned from that and improved on. So Nescafé is one of the better users of our technology. They have been using it for 4 years now in a row in Mexico, pioneering long-term success. They have adopted a new way of doing sustainability-led marketing through the beautiful campaign called New Year's Resolutions, where they co-create the resolutions of how people want to become a better version of themselves when the new year comes in Mexico as a market. Very successfully, they have implemented now this for 4 years, growing double-digit because of co-creation and digitally printed packaging. So those 5 learnings that you see there are the ways that you can benefit from this great technology in accelerating your sustainability transformation journey, harnessing the intersection of sustainability and personalization, driving change at the speed of culture, building on a physical platform which drives memorable ideas, and doubling your marketing ROI when you use co-creation as a technique. So with all of this, we invite you to inspire your marketing teams, your companies around you with purpose-led content, empowering consumers to co-create and to drive a much better future through effective, sustainable behavior change. So without further ado, I will leave this back to Sandra and thank her again for the great opportunity to speak here at Sustainable Brands Madrid, and you can always find us at reinventingcreativity.com. Looking forward on becoming partners of all of you here around Sustainable Brands.
Very nice, Jose. Thanks so much.
Gracias, Sandra.
Gracias. Very nice tools to activate, which is what we need to do right now. So, we're going to go a bit into detail now. Jose already said, told us about some very nice cases, but a bit quick. So we'll go a bit deeper now. And I have 2 people coming right now, Marta and Abel, that are going to share a real case with detail. So let me introduce them. I have here next to me now, yes, physical. Those are our first speakers, physical, which is exciting. Actually, Marta Colomé. Marta is Public Affairs and Sustainability Director at Idilia Foods. And Abel Sanchez Hermosilla, he's EMEA Brands and Agencies Innovation for HP Graphic Arts. And let me tell you a bit about them. Marta began her career at Bayer, then she joined Danone as marketing manager, and then after she joined Nutrexpa, where she led until 2007 all the marketing management of very important brands. Currently, Marta is Director of Public Affairs and Sustainability at Idilia Foods, a spin-off of Nutrexpa. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you very much.
And then I have here Abel, and let me tell you a bit Abel. Abel, he's an enthusiastic marketing professional with 15 years plus of experience in understanding consumers and growing brands across the healthcare and pharma industries, having worked at Novartis, Uriac, and Perrigo. Also, he's visiting professor of branding, I think, in a business school in Spain. So now, if you allow me, I'm going to change to Spanish for this 12 minutes conversation. I'm going to do it in Spanish because you allow me, my friends, my foreign friends, because I have here 2 Spanish people, and it's kind of weird, to be speaking English. So I just ask you, please, to go and have a coffee, have a 10 minutes break, which is also good as well, and come back, please, because you cannot miss our final talk with Andrew Winston. Andrew, he's author, global thought leader, advisor, a speaker, and he's going to tell us all about the project he's doing with Paul Polman, the renowned CEO. And bueno, un placer. Marta, Abel, gracias.
Un placer, la verdad, participar de un evento con un propósito pues tan relevante y de compartir con Marta pues este rato, la verdad, en representación de Idilia Foods, que además hemos tenido la oportunidad de colaborar en un pasado pues muy reciente. Así que gracias.
Muy bien, a vosotros.
Sí, un honor estar aquí con estos cracks de estas empresas, la verdad.
Nada, bueno, pues gracias a vosotros y bueno, pues nos vais a contar, porque hay un caso muy bonito por ahí que creo que tenemos que compartir, pero a ver, nos ha explicado, yo creo, Bastante bien, José, la verdad, en poco tiempo, pero muy claro y muy interesante un poco lo que hacéis. Muchas de las personas que nos están escuchando seguramente ya tienen experiencia alguna vez en impresión digital, saben de las eficiencias, ¿no?, que hay en estas técnicas con tiradas cortas, etcétera. Pero en concreto, Abel, explícanos un poquito más cómo puede acelerar la impresión digital la consecución de objetivos corporativos de la compañía, como puede ser, pues eso, CO2, que ha comentado también José, packaging waste. Explícanos un poquito más.
Muy bien, Sandra, pues la verdad que es una muy buena pregunta, porque lo que casi todo el mundo sabe, y hasta yo, hasta hace poco tiempo, es que la impresión digital es excelente y es mucho más eficiente para tiradas cortas y para velocidad de comercialización. Es decir, que cuando quieres imprimir 1, 10 o 1000 unidades de un artículo, pues es mucho más rápido, es mucho más barato y bueno, en este sentido, pues no tienes además cantidades mínimas de producción, lo que quiere decir que puedes llegar a producir incluso una sola unidad. Esto lleva a que muchas compañías pues utilicen la impresión digital para gestionar aquellas marcas o aquellas referencias de su portafolio que tienen menos rotación en ventas o, por otro lado, también para lanzar más rápido la innovación al mercado. Es decir, cuando tienen una idea, pues rápidamente la pueden testar en una comunidad, en una zona geográfica, poner unas cuantas unidades en las tiendas, evaluar y si funciona, pues realmente luego escalar. Pero como bien dices, el secreto viene cuando realmente se va incrementando la habilidad de incorporar más referencias, más marcas, en la impresión digital, porque es entonces cuando se liberan otra serie de beneficios que permite a las compañías acercarlas a sus objetivos de sostenibilidad. Y estamos hablando de beneficios como puede ser, por ejemplo, pues en primer lugar la reducción del impacto en el calentamiento global entre un 65 y un 80%, como puede ser la reducción del inventario innecesario, ya sea packaging o cualquier otro material impreso, al poder pues fabricar de una manera just in time o a demanda, como puede ser el habilitar la circularidad, porque se puede imprimir encima de cualquier material biodegradable, compostable, reciclable, orgánico, etcétera, y como puede ser también la compostabilidad de las tintas que realmente no dañan el planeta. Entonces, todos estos son razones importantes que pueden ayudar a las compañías a acercarlas a sus objetivos de sostenibilidad, pero, por otro lado, como vemos, podemos ayudar a proteger el planeta, pero, por otro lado, lo que más nos gusta también hacer, y una de las cosas que también pues disfrutamos muchísimo, es intentar ayudar a las marcas a cómo incorporar su propósito desde el packaging. Es decir, intentar ayudarlas a crear marketing para un mundo mejor.
Muchas gracias, Abel. Nada, habéis comentado antes ya algunos casos muy bonitos, pero bueno, aquí tengo a mi lado a Marta y bueno, ella nos va a comentar un caso con un poquito más de detalle, además de aquí, de una marca muy nuestra. Pero Marta, antes me gustaría preguntarte cómo estáis aproximando vosotros la estrategia de portafolio de sostenibilidad en las marcas, cómo estáis construyendo la contribución de cada marca a los objetivos corporativos de sostenibilidad, el rol que pueda tener todo esto del digital printing ahí. Explícanos un poco.
Sí, bueno, yo es que creo que las marcas hoy no tienen elección, ya no tienen que pensar si entran en temas de sostenibilidad, porque es más bien el cómo y el cuándo, ¿no? Está clarísimo que si tienes marcas históricas, queridas, marcas como las nuestras tienen más de 75 años Colacao, 50 años Nocilla, y además son líderes en los mercados compitiendo con las grandes multinacionales, es evidente que tienes una responsabilidad enorme, porque los consumidores hoy están esperando mucho de las marcas, están esperando más de las marcas que de los políticos, que de los gobiernos, y por eso no les podemos defraudar. Insisto que para nosotros el cuándo y el cómo es lo que ahora, o sea, en el mes de junio del 2021, una de las prioridades, se ha tocado antes, es el tema del packaging, ¿no? El packaging es crucial, el consumidor le está dando mucha importancia y es uno de los primeros temas que hay que afrontar en este poner en sostenibilidad a las marcas, no pure players, sino que llevan muchos años en el mercado, pero que tienen que estar ahí, seguir compitiendo y por tanto hay que ofrecer lo que el consumidor pide. También es muy importante, se ha tocado con Tony Chocolonely, la parte de materias primas, raw materials y toda la cadena de valor. En nuestro caso, quitar la palma a la nocilla ha sido un hecho muy relevante, nos ha dado gran crecimiento en cuota y en ventas. Y esto por eso digo, es un aspecto que paga entrar en sostenibilidad, da crecimiento. Después, el cómo ser más sostenibles con nuestros procesos, con la forma en la que fabricamos nuestros productos. Hemos esta semana enchufado las placas solares de nuestra fábrica de nocilla, que están en la cubierta de la fábrica de nocilla. Con esto cubrimos un 30% de la energía de nocilla que necesita y queremos llegar bueno, como se hablaba antes, ¿no? Yo pensaba que ser neutro en huella era muy fuerte, pero vamos, ser negativo ya es la bomba, o sea, por eso nunca estás al día en sostenibilidad, desde luego. Y por último, lo de trabajar en el propósito de nuestras marcas. Durante COVID hemos avanzado mucho en el propósito de la marca Colacao, hemos tenido grandes discusiones de si propósito de empresa, propósito de marca. Te he llamado varias veces, Ana, para que me ayudaras en este tema, porque no sabíamos ni por dónde empezar, pero la verdad es que este es un tema que tampoco hay elección. Trabajar en el propósito es revisitar las marcas y ponerlas en el siglo en el que estamos para los próximos 10 años por lo menos. Esto marca la guía, pero no solo es una revisión del propósito, del posicionamiento, sino que sobre todo es cómo podemos devolver a la sociedad una buena parte de lo que hemos hecho, lo hemos ganado como marca. Esto es indiscutible que será uno de los temas más relevantes. Ahí también la parte del packaging y del digital printing puede tener una función esencial, como en el caso de la acción Gracias, que comentaremos ahora.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Marta. La verdad que totalmente alineada con lo que comentas y que la conexión con los consumidores, ¿no? con alrededor de ese grupo, de ese set de valores, ¿no? Qué importante es y esto no nos lo enseñaron, a mí al menos cuando estudié marketing no me lo enseñaron y creo que nos toca aprenderlo a todos, ¿no? Bueno, Abel, cuéntame un poquito más, linkando un poco con lo que decía Marta ahora en torno a activación de propósito, el tema social, consumidor, ¿cómo la impresión digital puede ayudarnos a conseguir objetivos más sociales, ¿no? Corporativos, amplificando quizás mensajes de sostenibilidad que nos interesen pues llevar al ciudadano? Que yo creo que debemos dejar de hablar de consumidor, chicos, y nos debemos proponer hablar de ciudadano, pero de una manera definitiva ya. Aquí marqueteros los dos, o ex-marqueteros, Marta, no sé, general management de todo, ¿no? Ciudadanos, debemos hablar de ciudadanos ya.
Totalmente de acuerdo. Pues mira, yo te diría que nuestro rol, ya no solo dentro de HP, sino dentro de la industria, es un rol un poco innovador y disruptivo, en el sentido de que nosotros, tanto Pepe como yo, a lo que nos dedicamos es a humanizar nuestras máquinas, a humanizar nuestra tecnología, a traducir los beneficios técnicos que tienen estas bonitas máquinas pues al lenguaje de los decisores de las marcas, ¿no? Y esto lo hacemos pues fundamentalmente anclados en tres pilares fundamentales. Uno que es la personalización, el otro que es la co-creación y el otro que es la sostenibilidad. Hoy en día, como enlazando lo que decías ahora, ya no tiene ningún sentido una comunicación unidireccional marca consumidor o marca ciudadano, sino que realmente lo que estamos viendo es que son esas marcas que realmente pues incluyen su propósito o involucran al ciudadano en el storytelling, muchas veces también a través del packaging como medio de comunicación, las que realmente consiguen conectar con ellos de manera más relevante, que consiguen diferenciarse de la competencia y que consiguen generar un cambio de comportamiento más sostenible en el tiempo. Por otro lado, lo que estamos viendo es que la realidad es que las marcas todavía están arañando la superficie de todos los beneficios que pueden tener sus activaciones de marketing en cuanto a estos tres pilares, ¿no? Personalización, co-creación y sostenibilidad. Y es por esto que en HP hemos creado una plataforma de innovación. Hemos creado una plataforma de innovación que lo que pretendemos es ayudar a las marcas a conseguir sus sueños a través de un storytelling personalizado a escala, que esto en sí mismo parece un oxímoron, una contradicción, pero que al final es lo que te permite la tecnología, ¿no? La personalización a escala. Y básicamente lo hemos estructurado en 4 pasos que os voy a explicar, los 3 primeros que son los más importantes, ¿no? En el primer paso lo que intentamos es una corta sesión en la que intentamos educar a las marcas en estos terrenos de la personalización, de la Personalization Pinwheel que enseñó antes Pepe, y educarlos en cuáles son estos drivers emocionales por los cuales pues las personas nos gusta interactuar con algo físico, pero que al mismo tiempo es personalizado, ¿no? Y de esta manera puedo entender cuáles son los insights que pues las personas pueden tener para quererse relacionar con esa marca cuando realmente activa uno de los terrenos de la personalización. Y hay uno que es el más relevante para la sesión de hoy, que es el que llamamos materialismo consciente y que tiene mucho que ver también con la campaña que nos va a presentar Marta ahora mismo, porque al final el insight que hay detrás de este terreno de la personalización es que es nuestra responsabilidad como ser humanos pues el hacer del planeta un lugar mejor, ¿no? Entonces, este es el primer bloque y resumiendo mucho los otros dos, en el segundo bloque, en la segunda fase, lo que hacemos es todo lo contrario. Una vez nosotros hemos educado a las marcas en ese sentido, son las marcas las que nos educan a nosotros, nos explican sus valores, sus retos, sus objetivos, su propósito y a partir de ahí pasamos al paso 3, ¿no? Que es, una vez ellos han entendido nuestra parte y nosotros, como es la marca, generamos un workshop, generamos una sesión de trabajo donde el objetivo no solo es de generar ideas, sino de hacer que las ideas realmente pasen. De hecho, el output que obtienen las marcas de esta sesión en 2 mañanas es realmente un proyecto listo para imprimir en tiempo real. ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, el por qué nos está funcionando tanto este taller, este proceso, esta plataforma de innovación es, uno, porque todos los actores decisores de este proceso de innovación están en la misma sala, en ese workshop, que son las marcas, que son sus agencias de comunicación si trabajan con ellas y que somos nosotros, porque el output es algo ya listo para imprimir físico que puede extenderse a escala al día siguiente como aquel que dice, porque se soluciona uno de sus principales problemas, que es la generación de ideas disruptivas, pero no solo eso, sino también la rápida comercialización o ejecución de eso y al final pues se genera este triple win. 1, el de la marca que acabo de comentar, 2, el de las agencias de las marcas que tienen un nuevo proyecto y 3, pues nosotros, a pesar de que no cobramos nada por esta plataforma de innovación, pues generamos al final demanda a nuestros proveedores. Y este es un proceso pues que cualquier marca que quiera contactar con nosotros, pues este es el output que puede esperar de este proceso.
Pues muchas gracias, Abel. No, lo que me gusta de lo que dices es que nos centremos en esos esfuerzos alrededor del activar, ¿no? Del hacer y aprender haciendo, ¿no? Y bueno, vemos un ejemplo de lo que nos contabas y Marta nos quería compartir un caso que yo creo que para todos los que somos de aquí pues es bonito, ¿no?
Pues sí, gracias también por darme la oportunidad de explicarlo. Pues bueno, en Colacao, que es una marca muy icónica en España, de hecho se toman 4 millones de Colacao al día en este país, pues tiene, bueno, este es lo conoce todo el mundo, ¿no? Porque tiene más de 75 años y todo el mundo desayunando con él. Pero es verdad que, por tanto, ya identificas perfectamente a la marca, pero cambias la marca por un gracias, y esto ha sido una edición que hemos hecho justamente de digital printing, un buen ejemplo de digital printing, en el que hemos pensado que una edición solidaria en la que el 100% de los beneficios iban al Banco de Alimentos, que es uno de las ONGs que mejor funcionan en este país, y con ello pues hemos rendido un homenaje a todos los héroes y heroínas de COVID. De hecho, pensamos que pensamos que realmente no sabemos si se han agradecido bastante el trabajo de todos, pues policías, médicos, enfermeras, las personas que aplaudían desde el balcón. El COVID de alguna forma ha puesto a prueba las marcas y la forma en que han reaccionado también ha dicho mucho de ellas. Los consumidores se han quedado con eso también. Entonces este es un ejemplo de cómo con esto, es verdad que hemos hecho donaciones récord, este año han sido récord las donaciones de todas las empresas. Nosotros hemos dado 1 millón de euros en producto y en dinero, pero ha sido una buena forma de contribuir sobre todo a homenajear a estos héroes y heroínas de COVID a través de la técnica que nos ha contado Abel hace un momento.
Hay un pequeño vídeo que creo que, bueno, tenemos un minutito, lo podemos poner si quieres, sé que lo has traído para que lo viéramos. Pues lo vemos ahora en un minutito, si se puede lanzar desde el estudio, por favor. Y bueno, y ahora a continuación del vídeo, un poco lo que os voy a preguntar a los dos es, bueno, ¿qué pasa con el tema de las ventas, ¿no? ¿Cómo al final todo esto nos ayuda a incrementar ventas? Yo, la verdad es que no me lo creo, porque desde hace mucho tiempo no sabéis cuántos Sustainable Brands y cuántas reuniones, sobre todo, quiero, explicando que el propósito y el beneficio no son contrarios, sino todo lo contrario, ¿no? Y hoy, cuando empiezo a oír cosas como que el propósito lleva al crecimiento, pues me pongo nerviosísima, y así que no quiero dejar de preguntaros eso y luego vemos el vídeo para cerrar. Venga, Marta.
Pues la verdad es que sí, esta pregunta se la hacen muchas empresas. En nuestro caso, además, somos una empresa local y familiar, y también dicen, bueno, toda la sostenibilidad debe costar mucho dinero, ¿no? Porque sobre todo los accionistas mayores que tienen una edad, ¿no? Pero lo cierto es que para nosotros está clarísimo que detrás de iba a decir, ser sostenibles en raw materials y materias primas, yo lo que digo es que lo he visto, es que da crecimiento, nos ha dado un crecimiento de un 20% en ventas y un incremento de cuota de mercado, el haber quitado la palma de la nocilla y todo el portafolio. También ser eficiente con nuestros procesos, reducir energía, agua, residuos, utilizar no sobre embalajes, sino también el digital printing para no tener obsoletos, que es una parte importantísima de los residuos que generamos. Esto da claramente ahorros y eficiencias a las compañías. Por tanto, es interesante hacer sostenibilidad porque también hay dinero a ganar en este sentido y eficiencias. Pero en el caso, por ejemplo, del propósito de marca, es clarísimo que da crecimiento, porque te está preparando los cimientos de tu crecimiento futuro. Es un crecimiento que no es a corto plazo, como los que vengo diciendo de eficiencias o bien crecimiento de materias primas o packagings, pero es un crecimiento que prepara el futuro de las compañías y que está preparando el crecimiento futuro. Por tanto, no trabajar el purpose de las marcas es, de alguna forma, sentenciarlas. Está más que demostrado, y hay muchos estudios, que las marcas con propósito crecen mucho más que las marcas que no tienen propósito, ¿no? Entonces, yo soy una creyente.
Sí. Aquí precisamente un trabajo que vosotros también estáis haciendo, ¿no? En el estudio que hemos hecho global con 100 líderes alrededor del mundo, básicamente nos hablaban de la importancia de hacer esa estrategia de portafolio de marca, escoger qué marcas van a trabajar el propósito, esas marcas que tienen esa esencia, ¿no? Histórica, fuerte y que realmente pueden aportar al propósito con credibilidad, ¿no? Y hablábamos también de la importancia de tener esa prueba de propósito, de la importancia también de dar una prueba tangible, ¿no? de ese impacto, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, me parecía interesante lo que comentabas. Abel, tema resultados, desde tu perspectiva, ¿no? Tú que ves a muchísimas marcas, trabajáis con muchas marcas, ¿cómo lo ves?
Pues mira, me encanta hablar de resultados, pero como marketingiano déjame que empiece hablándote de las personas o de los ciudadanos, como decías hace un momento, ¿no? Y la verdad es que el contexto, como decía también Marta, pues lo está cambiando todo, ¿no? Sobre todo a raíz del COVID y los retos o las oportunidades que están viviendo tanto las marcas, ya sean grandes, medianas o pequeñas, como las personas, pues yo creo que son muy similares. El primero, y es uno que hemos nombrado antes también, es la gran cantidad de contenido digital al que estamos expuestos. Cada día más de 400 billones de contenidos, con más de 200 interacciones diarias. realmente si nos preguntamos cuánto tiempo hemos estado el último año pues delante de la pantalla de la televisión, del ordenador o del móvil, pues seguramente diríamos que es demasiado, y esto al final lo que ofrece es una oportunidad enorme para las marcas, para la reemergencia de la experiencia física. Ese momento en el que tenemos el producto delante, como el de Colacao que nos enseñaban ahora, y realmente sacamos la atención de la pantalla, ese momento para las marcas es oro y hay que intentar pues que sea memorable y maximizar esa experiencia. Este ingrediente, te diría, la reemergencia de la experiencia física, conjuntamente con la megatendencia que supone la personalización, como hemos comentado antes, y conjuntamente con la sostenibilidad, obviamente, y solo por dar un dato, el 75% de las generaciones jóvenes, millennials y generaciones Z, solo se comprometerían con una marca que realmente protege el planeta. Lo que estamos viendo es que las marcas que realmente priorizan estos tres ingredientes en sus estrategias de marketing y de comunicación son las marcas que realmente están conectando relevantemente y que realmente están construyendo valor. Y ahora sí, respondiendo a tu pregunta, yo creo que la consecuencia de todo esto es cuando resultados del estudio, como el que hemos hecho con Work, nos dicen que este tipo de campañas, comparados con todo el resto de campañas, nos dan un doble, o sea, el doble de mejores resultados, ya no solo en ventas, sino también pues en retorno a la inversión, que sabes que cada euro que vas a poner en este tipo de campañas pues te va a devolver el doble. Y por cerrar, por mi parte, me gustaría solo decir una nota, porque creo que el ejemplo que nos ha enseñado Marta de Colacao recoge un poco todos los ingredientes de lo que acabamos de hablar, ¿no? Es una marca que ha utilizado el packaging como un medio de comunicación, que ha utilizado ese medio de comunicación para poner el propósito en el corazón de la idea creativa, que ha utilizado la velocidad que tiene la impresión digital para poder adaptarse al cambio cultural que estaba pasando en una semana con una producción de 1 millón de botes, una marca que, como ha dicho, que tiene un equity racional y visual totalmente construido, ha aprovechado para construir un vínculo emocional ya no solo con sus consumidores, sino con pues el resto de personas, y al final eso es lo que realmente da resultados a la vez que construimos marketing para un mundo mejor.
Pues nada, gracias, Abel. Marta.
Sí, no, es verdad, tenía una sorpresa final antes de mostrar el vídeo, y es que, bueno, quería agradecer a la familia Quiero el haberme invitado, y por eso le damos con el corazón, lo que más queremos.
Hace ilusión, hace ilusión.
Y por supuesto también para Abel por haber trabajado conjuntamente.
Gracias. Este seguro que no lo tiro.
No, ese lo guardamos seguro. Qué ilusión. Muchas gracias, Marta.
A vosotros.
Pues nada, yo creo que lo dejamos aquí. Muchísimas gracias. Yo creo que así hemos hablado mucho del tema de la activación de propósito, hemos hablado mucho de cómo cada marca debe contribuir a esos objetivos corporativos a través de herramientas como puede ser la vuestra, útiles. Bueno, yo creo que lo dejamos aquí. Si os parece, cerramos con ese vídeo que es bonito y siempre a todos nos hace ilusión ver algo de Colacao, y nos vamos a la siguiente sesión y I'll come back to English. I'll see you in a minute. Thanks so much. Gracias.
Hoy, más que nunca, desde Colacao queremos daros las gracias. Gracias a todos los que os habéis sacrificado para cuidarnos, alimentarnos, protegernos e informarnos para que millones de personas pudiéramos estar en casa con la tranquilidad que no nos iba a faltar de nada. Desde Colacao queremos daros las gracias por tanto, con esta edición solidaria cuyos beneficios se destinarán íntegramente al Banco de Alimentos. Solo os podemos decir gracias.
Well, we are getting to the closing conversation now. We are going to share the insights on the necessary transformation required to build back better, following on our completed research. We are going to have Andrea and Dimitar here. I'm going to introduce them in a minute. Actually, Dimitar will explain how the Sustainable Brands Transformational Roadmap enables brands to assess their maturity across 5 critical sustainability dimensions, which are the ones that we used in the research that we are sharing. And Andrew is going to talk about the new book he's actually writing with Paul Polman on being net positive, which aligns to our definition of a sustainable brand when it has achieved level 5 across the 5 critical sustainability dimensions. And I see they are over there, so I'm going to introduce them properly. Hi, Dimitar. Hi, Andrew. So good to see you. Let me introduce them, please. We have with us Andrew Winston. He's a globally recognized expert on megatrends and how to build companies that thrive by serving the world. Named to Thinkers 50 Radar Class of 2020, as a thinker to watch, his views on strategy have been sought after by many of the world's leading companies, including 3M, DuPont, Johnson & Johnson, Marriott, PepsiCo, Unilever. He's actually the author of the bestsellers Green to Gold and The Big Pivot, which I've read, and they are amazing, by the way. Hopefully you've read them as well. His latest book is Net Positive, How Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take, co-authored with the renowned CEO Paul Polman. And he's also a respected speaker, reaching audiences of thousands at executive meetings and around the world. So, Andrew, so good to have you back.
It's good to be here. Gracias por invitarme a este importante evento. That's it, and I appreciate you letting me speak in English.
Tu español is getting better every day, and really, so you just need to take some holidays here. Exactly. Like Dimitar. Dimitar, let me introduce Dimitar. He's also a close friend. He's actually the Director of Knowledge and Insights at Sustainable Brands Global. He's the Senior Sustainability, Regeneration and Brand Transformation Expert at Sustainable Brands. He holds a master's degree in Management Science and Engineering from Stanford and a Bachelor in Economics and Mathematics from Oberlin College. And before entering the field of sustainability, Dimitar worked as well in international development at the International Monetary Fund and also in economic consulting. So welcome both of you, and thanks for being here with us for this closure, special closure with you too. Muchas gracias. And well, I'd like first to just open the conversation so the audience know where we are with Dimitar a bit. With the Dimitar, I don't know if you would be so kind to share briefly this orientation and navigation tool that we use at Sustainable Brands. It's not an assessment to look great in the photo, it's really an orientation and navigation tool. And I think that then we'll be able to understand better what Andrew is going to tell us, yeah? Because he's going to speak about net positive. And I think it will be helpful if you can just make some headlines for us. Thanks, Dimitar.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That sounds good. It's a delight to be here. It's an absolute pleasure to be in the same session as Andrew. I will share just a quick memory. I attended Sustainable Brands for the first time in 2012. And at that point, I was an intern and a volunteer. And I later joined the organization, and I have been working there for 9 years now. But, you know, as a volunteer, entering the Sustainable Brands community in June 2012, one of the first things I saw when I went there to that conference was Andrew Winston on the main stage giving a keynote. And he has been one of my heroes since then to this day. So what a delight. And Sandra, thank you for hosting me and us for this session. Sure, I'm happy to spend a few minutes giving a very quick overview, very quick, of the SB Brand Transformation Roadmap. I know that most of the session will have a conversation, but for orientation, as you say, let me do that. So as you said, it is, and as the name suggests, it is an orientation and navigation tool, this Brand Transformation Roadmap. It was created by the Global Advisory Board of Sustainable Brands, co-led by myself and Mr. Kevin Hagen. And the goal there is to paint the whole journey all the way from business as usual or doing very little to nothing on sustainability, all the way to what it truly means to be a sustainable brand in a sustainable company. And those two go hand in hand, by the way. You cannot be one without the other and vice versa. And we created a whole theory of change and a whole description of the entire journey. And we wanted to be very specific about the entire journey. The journey happens over these 5 dimensions that are illustrated here by 5 key characteristics of what it means to be a truly sustainable brand. So let's start there for just a moment. So this is the destination. I said journey, right? Think of this as the destination. If you become a fully sustainable brand and company, what will you have achieved? What do you have? Well, these 5 things. So what they are. So first, if you're a sustainable brand, you would have a clearly defined, articulated, fully embedded, and fully activated positive purpose, environmental or social or both. Secondly, you would have consistently leveraged the power of brand influence, especially through marketing and communications and PR, but also other types of stakeholder engagement to drive a systemic shift toward a more sustainable world. So influencing all of your stakeholders and your customers and employees above all to transform together, okay? So using that brand influence, that's the second one. Number 3, a sustainable brand would operate in a way that ensures the health, resilience, and flourishing of society and the environment, does no harm in any way to either of those. And this is very important, it acts to regenerate or restore parts of nature and society as necessary for the overall functioning of the whole system, parts of nature and society that we have harmed or degenerated way too much. So that's about operations and supply chain. Fourth, a sustainable brands would deliver products and services that result in sustainable outcomes throughout the whole life cycle of the product, all the way and including what happens after the end of life of that product or service. Finally, a sustainable brand would demonstrate the kind of governance, especially through transparency, integrity, and proactive leadership. And I know we'll talk more about what that means, such that it has no conflicts or misalignment between governance and leadership inside the company and anything it does outside the company, and such that it fully supports the other 4 pillars or 4 dimensions that I just described. So that's the destination. If you have achieved all of those 5 things as a company, according to our framework here and this theory of change, we say, congratulations, you are a sustainable brand and a sustainable company. But of course, that's a very tall order. Almost nobody is there yet as a company. We could discuss and debate, for example, whether amazing companies like Patagonia or Interface, which we had earlier today, are there or not all the way. Some are very close, but in the larger picture, very few companies are close to achieving that. So that's why we decided it would be particularly helpful with that destination in mind that I just described to then look at the journey. So here's a quick visual that shows the journey. So if you think of the 5 characteristics that together define a sustainable brand that I just listed a minute ago, think of that as level 5, sustainable brand. So that is the destination, okay? And then there is a journey in each of the 5 dimensions, a purpose journey, a brand influence journey, an operations and supply chain journey, products and services journey, and a governance journey. So it's 5 journeys from wherever you are now as a company to that destination. So that is the core framework. And together, these 5 journeys together make one big journey. The benefit of this tool is that we break down the journey into very practical, step-by-step, descriptions of all the levels along the journey. So level 1 is doing nothing, business as usual. You're not really engaging very much with sustainability or regeneration in any way. And then level 5, I described a minute ago, is you being a sustainable brand and company. We don't have time to explore all the details of what's in every level, of course, in these 5 areas. We have a whole longer workshop, an hour or even 2 hours sometimes, where we discuss these things at length. But here, for the purposes of a quick introduction, I think this works. And then just a couple more points before I bring it back to Sandra and Andrew. As you can probably already imagine, any given company can be anywhere along each of the 5 journeys, right? And in fact, companies are usually not the same level, along the 5 journeys. They can be advanced in one journey. In this example, company X is advanced in governance, pretty advanced on purpose and operations and supply chain, but not so great on, let's say, brand influence and products and services. And so it's really interesting to look at each journey on its own and then the 5 of them together. A lot of insight comes from that alone. And then let me just share, we have had more than 100 companies who have taken the self-assessment to see where they are on the journey, right? So there is an assessment and a bunch of other answers that come with the full usage of this tool. I think it will be very interesting. I know, Sandra, you were going to ask me in a moment, so I'm just going to share it now.
Yeah, fine.
So that we have it in front of us. Where are companies along this journey, right? So before that, I described it conceptually in that graphic a moment ago, but here, now 5 slides with the distributions of where the companies are. So we have had more than 100 companies. These are mostly big multinational global companies from a range of industries. Most of them are Sustainable Brands corporate members, a lot of consumer-facing big brands that everybody would recognize. So it's 100 companies, but you can think of it as an approximation for the Fortune 500 companies. It's a very similar profile. Okay, in terms of who they are and what industries, and it's like that. Okay, so you see a very similar story play out, and I'll just take maybe 30 more seconds just to show you. So this is the results for the purpose dimension. You see the levels at the bottom, level 1 to 5, right? You see most companies on purpose are still on level 1 or level 2, more than 65% combined over there. We also see there are some leaders at level 5, so that's amazing. So again, these are companies like Ben & Jerry's and like Allbirds and, some of the companies truly leading on purpose. But what's interesting is not too many followers immediately following them at level 4 and level 3. So there is this U shape. And then similar results. So this is brand influence. So this is how you use your brand to influence your consumers and other stakeholders. As you see, very similar picture. Even more at the beginning levels, even fewer in the middle, and some leaders at level 5, which is great, but not enough followers. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. Operations and supply chain, it gets even more interesting here. Even more at the beginning of the journey, very few have achieved level 5 here, very, very few. Nobody at level 4, as you see. So basically almost everyone's getting started on operations and supply chain, in the context of the whole journey. Products and services, very similar to operations and supply chain, virtually the same. And then governance, the last one, is a little bit different. Here we see a little bit different of a distribution. More companies are at the high levels of achievement. Here you see significantly more at level 4 and 5. But still, most are still at the beginning of the journey. So I just wanted to share that. We can. I know we'll have a conversation about a lot of these things, but that's where we are. So that's why this kind of tool and this kind of roadmap is really important to consider the whole journey, because most companies are still at the beginning of the journey and they need help with orientation, seeing the whole journey, and navigation, getting specific guidance on how to advance. Obviously, Andrea is a world-class expert in helping companies do that, so I'm sure he'll share a lot. And he'll talk a lot about level 5, which is a lot of the net positive qualities of companies are basically level 5. But that's my introduction. Back to you, Sandra.
Great insights, Dimitar. Thanks very much. I think you set very well the stage for the conversation. So I'm coming to Andrea now. Andrea, actually, many companies are working toward being less bad, reducing the impacts that they create. But your vision Andrew, is one of net positive. No? It's that number 5 that we had on the scale with Dimitra. Tell us about the book, please, you are currently writing, and what it means for you to be net positive. And maybe we have the book there. Oh, yeah. So in case anybody is interested, it looks great. Going to read it. Andrew.
Great. Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you, Dimitra. Dimitra, I don't know if you remember this, but so I guess Sustainable Brands created this 5x5 it's been a few years now.
Yeah.
And I think I was the first one to borrow it and use it and do it in Spanish.
In Colombia, I think, no? In Colombia, Andrew, yeah. I remember.
I worked with an energy company in Colombia. They translated it. I spoke in English, but they did the workshop kind of working with it in Spanish. And I followed it a little bit. What's interesting about those scores, by the way, is that for the most part, anybody saying they're 5 is wrong. And you saw some really interesting distribution there, where I loved the ones that had nothing on 4 and a few people on 5, because I think once you start overestimating, you go to 5. I think the people that say they're 2 and 3 are probably being a little harsh on themselves, but are closer to accurate. I mean, as you said, Dimitra, there's no one really at level 5. This is the North Star, and this is similar to what we talk about in our new book about net positive. It's a similar kind of definition to a sustainable brand, and we have kind of our own 5 or 6 step progression that we don't talk about in the book, but was kind of in our thinking as we wrote it, where it's more in the traditional terms of compliance to philanthropy to CSR, and then ending up at net positive. And so let me define kind of what we mean by that, because people have used the phrase net positive like they do carbon positive or carbon negative, which confusingly is the same thing. And they generally talk about, just carbon, just, climate change. And I think what's good about Sustainable Brands' version is to have the 5 categories to say that you're moving on this journey in a number of dimensions of the business. So our definition kind of, straight out of the book is a net positive business is one that is improving the well-being for everyone it impacts, everyone it touches, really at all scales, meaning every product, every operation or facility, every region or country they operate in, and really every stakeholder. So that's employees, suppliers, communities, customers, and even if you extend your thinking to future generations as a stakeholder and the planet as a stakeholder. And this is the North Star, right? This is the goal, is that your impact is always positive. And by definition, really no company is there yet. The systems aren't in place to allow you to be net positive on most dimensions, right? There's no grid in the world that's entirely renewable yet. I mean, we're going to get there. We don't have everything in place yet. But this is the goal, and it means rethinking the purpose of business from being maximizing shareholder value in the short run to serving the world, to serving multiple stakeholders, not just shareholders, and doing well for shareholders because you're doing this. The bottom line, the ultimate question that we're asking in this book is the world better off because your business is in it? And if you can't find a way to yes, then what are you doing? And it's something I've been thinking about personally as I wrote this with Paul Pullman about my own role in the world and how do you know if you're net positive? And these are tough questions to measure. And I'll just say finally on the definition of this for us, that I think critical distinction in what we call level 5 or 6, whatever you want to call it, is not just the positive impact, but a particular focus on systems transformations. So it isn't just your own impacts and can you go beyond, maybe making a little more energy in your facilities than you need, so you're having a positive impact. It's, are you working with your sector, with a region on transforming the energy system or transforming the way packaging works in your industry, et cetera. And, there's many dimensions of this we talk about in the book, and I think we'll get into that in the kind of rest of the questions about partnerships, but it's really about changing systems and thinking at that scale. And no matter how big your business is, everybody has systems they're part of, even if they're smaller, even if they're local. They have a local system, a local government, even if they're not working with the national government. So let me leave it there for now, and I think you'll see as we talk about it kind of what we mean in practice.
That's great, Andrew. And could I ask you before we start the dialogue, just curious about, I mean, what's your objective with the book? I mean, your objective, because I know you, I can see it. Paul's objective. I mean, what would be a success? I mean, apart from selling books, which I guess it's not the reason why you do this, but what is your objective when you decide, you and Paul Polman, to just let's write this?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer is we want to start a movement, right? We want that the language of net positive is what everybody's using. I don't frankly care too much about the specific words, but that the ideas of the subtitle includes, you know, giving more than you take. If people want to talk about it that way, that's fine. If they don't like some sustainability people don't like the phrase net positive because of it can seem like greenwashing, or and as we've defined it, we're not talking about offsetting one thing from another, and it's much more complicated and nuanced than that. But our goal is a movement, right, where the business community rethinks its function in society at scale, right? And that's why we keep coming back to systems. And for Paul, you know, I can't speak for him fully. You can read the preface and kind of his personal comments. It's partly legacy. I mean, he's already was the CEO of one of the world's great companies for 10 years, but he's now working with this group Imagine that he co-founded with a few peers, with a bunch of CEOs, and they're trying to change systems. So he's trying to work at that scale. So for him, it's not book sales, right? He doesn't need exposure. He doesn't need, you know, money, frankly. It's about the change in the system. And that's fundamentally mine too. You know, personally, I'd like to, you know, just on my own transformation and journey, is expand on the impact I've had on business and have a bigger one if I can. And you know, play a bigger role in changing how companies think about themselves and what their role is. And then, you know, the ultimate goal of that movement is that we really tackle fundamentally climate and inequality, and biodiversity as a kind of third grand challenge. If we're not solving those, then it's just a lot of nice reports from companies saying they're going to be net positive. We have to start seeing the metrics, like parts per million in the atmosphere, like really big metrics, that we have to start seeing them turn to the better to know that we're getting anywhere. And there's intermediate metrics. How many companies have a science-based target? How many are on their way? I mean, there's good metrics along the way, but we have to start seeing, you know, the number of people living in poverty going down, the number of people living in free democracies going up, you know, the number of people working in modern slavery going to zero. It comes down to the SDGs. I mean, that's kind of Paul's vision. It's the underlying current in everything we do is, are we solving for those, if you don't, the sustainable development goals or the global goals, are we reaching those as a society? Are we getting to those 16 categories with partnership being the 17th? And if we're not, then it doesn't matter how many books we sell, right? It just, you know, who cares? So that's, you know, that's the long version of a movement. That's the short answer.
Many thanks for sharing that, Andrew. Nice to hear. Dimitar, it all starts with purpose, no? Yeah. Based on our research, the new paradigm of purpose, it's all about a clear delivery point, simple, actionable, a transformational promise that really connects to people, to stakeholders, to citizens. No, we were speaking previously about the learning from the doing. No, we must think about it. Of course, we must reflect on it. But at some point, we need to just go and do, no? And that is even more important now, no? And as well, we were speaking about with the interviews that we did about how to try to have a contagious purpose amongst employees, no? How important that was before attempting to communicate externally, no? I think that you have a privileged view as well of many brands in the world. What do you think have been our largest mistakes in purpose for the last years? what for you would be like the key learning or the key learnings that you've extracted from all what you've seen?
Great question. Thank you, Sandra. And before I start, I'd just like to say I'm a big fan of the Build Back Better study, and I highly recommend it. If anyone watching this has not read it or is not familiar with it, I highly recommend it. Okay, so to your question, what are our largest mistakes around purpose that I have seen companies make? I will point out three common mistakes that we see. One is that sometimes the purpose is not specific enough, and therefore not inspiring enough, or not, as we like to say sometimes, not sticky enough. It doesn't stick to your mind enough, and there is a very nice phrase in English that when you try to do too much, you try to boil the ocean. So sometimes companies try to boil the ocean with their purpose and make it about everything, or make it very vague, like we will leave a better world to our children. And that's amazing. We want to do that. It's just that when it's on that level of abstraction or vagueness and not specific enough, it can be difficult to engage with it or to get inspired by it, whether you are a consumer of that company or an employee or even a leader of the company. So that's one. Another one is not being integrated enough in the approach. For example, a few minutes ago, when I was describing the purpose journey in our roadmap, I said, when you arrive at the destination purpose, you have not only defined it, articulated it, but very important, you have fully embedded it inside the company and activated it outside the company with external stakeholders. Of course, starting with consumers and customers, but also all others. So when it's not fully embedded or integrated, then it can break down very quickly, So it doesn't translate into specific actions. It doesn't translate into how different departments and teams around the company see their work, and how to apply the purpose to their work. And it becomes something that's very nice to have in a statement, on the wall, online, on social media, but not fully integrated into the actual work of all the teams and departments in the company. So that sounds simple, but that continues to happen too often. So that's a frequent mistake, that it's not embedded well inside the whole company. And then finally, I think in the process of embedding it, many companies don't have a lot of imagination yet about new types of employee engagement to excite employees and to inspire them. I will quote one of my favorite types of activities that I know Unilever did a few years ago, and maybe some other companies have done as well. But Unilever at one point, and they've been public about this, so it's well known, they held a workshop inside, and this was Unilever US, at least the US, trying to connect personal purpose for their employees to the purpose of some of the product brands, their sustainable living brands, and ultimately Unilever as a whole. And giving employees that kind of bridge to engaging with the company purpose through their own personal, individual purpose of what they want to do with their lives, sharing their dreams and aspirations as a purpose on an individual level, that's amazing. So that kind of workshop is an innovative kind of activity with employees that is not often enough yet seen as one strong tool of employee engagement, So tools like that would help a lot, just more imagination, spice up the employee engagement. So those are the main ones that I see.
Many thanks, Dimitar. Actually, it's one of the cases we've included in the study, that one that you mentioned from Unilever, very interesting, connecting the personal purpose with the purpose of the company. It's amazing. Andrew, I wanted to ask you like a very practical question, but how do you think a company can get started on this road to net positive? I liked what you said before as well about metrics, no? Because if we don't measure, we cannot really see where we are, no? But I leave it there. It's not an easy question.
Well, I mean, and it's been a big question as we're thinking about the book going out and creating a movement is, you can say, here's the things a net positive company does, and that's the core of the book, but there's a bunch of kind of inputs or starting points or data that has to kind of go into that, whether a company's ready to start talking about, aggressive goals, for example. And so there's some basic stuff like, what's your footprint? Where's your impacts along your value chain? And the leading companies are years into this, right? But I still am working with companies at times that really haven't done this yet, or haven't had a factory audit or a dumpster dive to see where their waste is, to just understand their current footprint and impacts, both human and environmental. So that's the start of, whether it's net positive or just whatever you want to call it, sustainability, anything. The first step is just knowing where you are. And there's some great support tools like the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board with their materiality lists by sector, the Sustainability Consortium that Walmart started years ago with 100 or 110 different products and where the hot spots in the footprint are. Like, you can figure this out directionally, but you have to start to get the tools in place to measure. And I think that sounds easier than it's turned out to be for a lot of companies. And there's still, the range of where companies are on this is just vast. And so that's kind of the starting point. And to know where your people are, to know how engaged they are, start to survey them, start to understand their needs and desires, start to map out the hurdles and problems that stand in the way of you doing better as a sector or as a business. What are there's not enough renewables on the grid near me, or there's not a recycling infrastructure for my materials. You start to figure out the problems. So that's kind of all the basics in a way. And then, so our book in a way kind of skips over that and says, you got to get all that. But then the starting point that we begin with is really very personal, and to just build exactly on what Demeter was just talking about. Unilever did, in fact, start with this development program for their top executives. Our book, the first step is really like, the chapter we is titled, How Much Do You Care? And it's really aimed at the CEO or the leader, the person reading this, to say, do you care? I mean, do you understand the issues in the world, the climate, biodiversity, inequality? Do you understand what's going on? And do you care about it? I mean, that's kind of Paul's fundamental question to people. And if you don't, you're probably not going to go very far on this journey, right? You have to actually care that there's vast inequality, or that the climate is in deep trouble. And so then very quickly you get to purpose discussions. And so Unilever did 10 years ago start with a development program for the leaders, starting with the top 100, where they took them through a week-long process of discovering their purpose, their own journey. They expanded it to the kind of top 1,000 executives. And over years, they developed a shorter, quicker program for every employee, and something like 60 or 70,000 people have done it. And it is that process Demeter talks about of, what's my purpose, where do I want to be, and how does that connect to the company's overall discussion. For Unilever, it's making sustainable living commonplace. And there's plenty of great mission statements out there from a lot of companies, and I think it's about people finding their connection to that. So it starts really with inside. We have to start with who we are and who the organization is. So not just the people, but the organization itself. Unilever, Paul went back to their history, the founding, the original writings of the founder. And I think every company can do that to some extent and say, what were we founded for? Why? What was our purpose? What problem were we trying to solve? And just see, what does that connect to today's needs? So those are kind of the starting points. And then we'll kind of, I think, come back to later, it builds towards things like setting really aggressive goals and getting towards partnerships. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of becoming a net positive company, is to engage in deep, broad partnerships on a bunch of issues. And it's something companies are not regularly trained for or used to, but it's kind of what has to happen now. Our problems are just way too big. There's no company large enough to solve any problem that we're talking about. Walmart's tiny compared to the scale of all energy use or all transportation of goods. It doesn't matter how big you are. You're not big enough to solve it alone. So I think part of that getting started is that kind of realization and understanding of the system, and that what needs to happen is a much more open view of your role in the world and how much you need to work with others.
Many thanks, Andrew, for the good summary. Yeah, if we forgot who we are, maybe that's a key pillar of all our problems, no? Right now, as organizations and as persons as well, no? Okay. Dimitar, linking a bit to the partnership area, and that Andrew was as well commenting on, the new paradigm of brand influence is based on new forms of leadership, no? That go beyond their own company, really, to generate those systemic changes in the industry that build powerful relations with consumers, with the stakeholders, based on a set of authentic values and join in and push forward existing social movements, no? Would you tell us about a brand or some brands that for you are successfully actually doing this in the brand influence dimension?
Sure. I already mentioned, I think, a couple as I was introducing the roadmap a few minutes ago. I will mention a few more, and there are many, but I will tell you some of my personal current favorites.
You've seen a lot, so.
Yeah. So, and you know, some of them are really big multinationals. So I'm a big fan of IKEA and their ambition to be fully circular by 2030. I'm a big fan of Danone, for example, another one from a different industry. I'm a big fan of the latest regeneration announcements by companies like Timberland and General Mills and the Target and Walmart even on that dimension are giving hope. Starbucks announced that they want to be, you know, resource negative, and so what does that mean? That's another term. It's in the neighborhood of net positive, or you know, or and so forth, but and regenerative. But probably the most inspiring one, Sandra, to give you just a few more names, and my top favorites these days tends to be just at the moment. And again, I'm speaking only for myself here, not for sustainable brands or anything like that. But for me, it's some of the B Corps, some of the best B Corps, like, you know, Tony's Chocolonely, which we had earlier in the program. Companies like Allbirds, I mentioned, Patagonia, companies like Guayaki, who are doing amazing regenerative work, both environmentally and socially. In their supply chain in South America, they source the produce there, and then they make these amazing, tasty beverages like Guayaki juice and mate. Yeah, so these are some of my favorites. I'll mention just one more because it represents an important category that is among my favorites. I'm a big fan of Impossible Foods. Yeah, and Beyond Meat, because they represent a big promise for us to enjoy, you know, really tasty burgers without having to torture animals for that. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps, Sandra.
Yeah, no, it's we have a lot in common. We had actually Beyond Meat, and Seth Goldman was here a couple of years ago. Amazing guy. So, Andrew, I wanted to ask you about the palm oil case. I know that you know the case very well, and I think we can have very nice learnings from that one. Would you share a bit with us headlines on that?
Yeah, so it was one of the process of doing this book. I learned a lot. I mean, I've been in this field for a lot of years, but I dug in on some issues and dug deeper with Unilever. I mean, the book is not just about Unilever, but obviously with Paul, that's the, you know, majority of the cases. But I spoke to people all over the world in the organization and just got a deeper sense of the different issues, you know, in different markets and how companies manage them. And the book, as I said, builds to partnerships. And really, to me, the ultimate story, the end of kind of the partnership systems chapter is palm oil. And the reason is that palm oil is almost like a perfect storm of an issue. It is contributing, one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases, because we cut down forests. Indonesia and Malaysia are major contributors to emissions, not virtue of their size of economy, but from cutting down forests, basically for palm oil. And it's the same set of issues in Brazil and elsewhere for cutting down for soy, for cattle. And it's tied to inequality. It's tied to poverty. Like, people have to cut down forests so they can grow stuff to either eat directly or to create energy or to grow to sell. And it's, you know, it's tied to biodiversity, it's tied to pandemics, we get closer and closer to nature, we get, you know, like, it's tied to everything. And it's incredibly complicated. And it's been something that they've worked on in the sector for 15 years. There's been goals from the big buyers. Unilever is the largest buyer of palm oil in the world. But as I said before, even being the largest buyer in the world, they're only 3%. So they can't control this market. And in fact, the major brands, the ones that are at Sustainable Brands things all the time, the Unilevers and P&Gs, and, you know, they've been doing pretty well with buying from providers who are following more sustainable practices, but there's still vast kind of unbranded buyers all over the world for low quality, low price goods, and they don't care about the sustainable, you know, palm oil certifications. So what's ended up happening over years of, frankly, failure. I mean, I talked to Greenpeace. It didn't accomplish much in terms of reducing deforestation. Is in the last few years, there's actually finally been a reduction in deforestation. And the reason is, after talking to a bunch of people around this issue, is the nature of the partnership was finally systemic. So they do what's called in this realm jurisdictional approach to rethinking agriculture, rethinking kind of communities and livelihoods. So you go into a smallish area. It isn't like, let's talk to the whole country, but it's a handful, maybe hundreds, not thousands and thousands of farmers. And you bring them better practices, species that give you 2 times the yield, so they don't have to cut down more forest. But it isn't enough for Unilever to say, we only want to buy from you if you do this, because they can't just do it. They need financing, right, to transition to better practices, just like you do in organic foods. So they had to bring in Norway's sovereign fund, Unilever and others put some money up, and bring in both the local municipalities, I mean, the farmers themselves, the big buyers, the wholesalers, the banks, it's everybody. And that's really complicated, right? To get everybody on the same page and make it so that the economic incentives for people are not to cut down the forest. And they're finally having success. And this is both incredibly hopeful for me getting into this, and also kind of scary, because the lesson is how long this takes and how hard it is. And I'm hoping on other topics, agricultural especially, we will see kind of a leapfrog as people can look at these models that are working and do it quicker. But as you all know, I mean, climate-wise, we're out of time. And we can't take another 15 years on major commodities and agriculture around the world. We have very limited time to somehow stop the Amazon from tipping into a carbon sink to a carbon, you know, producer. And it's complicated by politics, right? By the politicians leading these countries. Bolsonaro doesn't seem to care about cutting down the Amazon, and it's really hard to deal with that. So you need these really systemic groups where you've got, you know, the NGO experts and the business and the government all in one room, working for years and developing metrics and just doing the hard work. You know, and that's daunting, but it's also incredibly exciting, right? To see the scale of change that can happen. So to me, it's the ultimate story. It was very detailed and, you know, wonky. I don't know what the word is in Spanish, but very like, you know, process oriented, but that's the work on the ground. So I, you know, recommend everyone kind of get to know that story and see what we can learn.
Very interesting, Andrea. We'll have a good look at that story for sure. Dimitar, I wanted to ask you as well about governance. We've touched it a bit during the session, but we saw your numbers as well. I was impressed with the governance. How do you think governance empowers sustainability leadership inside and outside the company?
Yeah, great question, Sandra. Thank you. Before I answer, I just want to mention 2 more companies that I admire. One I did not mention on purpose a few minutes ago because we have been talking about them so much. Unilever, huge fan, and all of their sustainable living brands like Ben & Jerry's and Dove and so many others. And so that's great. And then the other though is Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So big fan. And to Andrew's point, I mean, I cannot name a bigger leader on climate, especially in their sector, than Microsoft, who have pledged not only to have science-based goals, not only to go then beyond that to carbon neutral soon, but beyond that to become a carbon negative company and erase all of their historical carbon footprint, which is phenomenal. Really, really bold, ambitious leadership from them to set a tone and inspire others to do more than the minimum, and so it's a huge fan. Okay, now to your question, because I know we only have a few more minutes. I'll try to be very quick here. There's many ways that governance empowers leadership, but here's my top three. I just mentioned it, so I'll start with science-based goals. So good governance is aware of the proper level of ambition that is required at this point, but is also a win-win and a win for the company as well to make it more resilient for the future and avoid risk. And so to do that, to set science-based goals, certainly on climate, but now there are more. Now you can set science-based goals also around water, land use and forests, and more environmental impacts. And then there's the equivalent of science-based goals also for social, like minimum living wage and other things. Okay, that's one. Second, to start training young leaders and up-and-coming leaders, the executives of tomorrow, as well as training current leaders, of course, the current, CMO and CFO and all the rest of a leadership of a typical company, but also the people coming up as future leaders to think in more complete and more transformative ways, to really break down assumptions and we're doing things because that's just the way we have been doing it, to break all that down in favor of rethinking the entire business model. I know we talked about that earlier today, and Andy mentioned it in a few ways, but that deeper look in the mirror in every business leader, and that starts with the current governance, training current leaders and future leaders. And finally, to expand the notion of risk and opportunity, right? So to go from what one of my good friends in the field, Mark McElroy, likes to say, to go from monocapitalism to multi-capitalism. And many people say that now because it's just so great. We need to go to multi-capitalism. So think in multi-capital ways, right? As a leader and as governance in everything you do, including all the 5 areas of the roadmap. So these are the important ways.
Very good points, Dimitra, very good point. I think they are all present in the study, very good insights. Andrew, I'll ask one for you. Some companies, I think you mentioned this before, Andrew, and I think it's a very important question, and we need to address it, because some companies are really working hard to reach net zero. I don't know, for example, here in Spain, closer to us, Coca-Cola Euro Pacific partners in Europe is working already to reach net zero. We have Brambles, we have a Spanish leading team from here that they have the ambition even to become and to pioneer regenerative supply chain. But also there's been pushback lately on some companies that had previously set goals to be net zero. So my question is, some people would say that net positive is just a new form of greenwashing, no? But I know that the three of us here now, we are strongly convinced that it's not, no? What would you say to those people, Andrew? I mean, you see a lot of people every day. What would you say to those guys?
I guess I've always been less concerned about greenwashing. People use that word pretty broadly. I guess I always think of it more narrowly to mean a company knowingly saying they're doing something green and it really isn't. And maybe you'd include what's more common is companies, bragging or saying, look what we did. And it's just not that relevant. Like a bank saying, look at our two-sided copying or our digital, you can go digital with your checking account versus where their money goes as their footprint. I mean, like, it's just irrelevant. So that stuff I think is maybe greenwashing. I don't know why there's such a hit on net positive. I mean, if companies have set the goal to get to zero carbon, that's what the science says, and that's what we need to do. I think where it gets less impressive is if their plan is just to buy carbon offsets or just buy renewable energy credits, because they don't really, at this point, I mean, maybe 10 years ago, a renewable energy credit would help drive the building of renewables. That doesn't really do anything anymore. It's not providing capital that makes sure that gets built. That's why like a power purchasing agreement, which is what what most companies do for a chunk of their renewables, is real. It's providing a contract to buy energy so it gets built to provide that energy. But I think, the bar of what it means to be pursuing net zero and carbon is rising. Demeter mentioned Microsoft. They are the really arguably net positive or pursuing net positive on carbon because they're also huge in carbon sequestration. And Google in parallel is also really up there with their goal to be 24/7 renewable, meaning by 2030, they want to be zero carbon like every hour, like on site. So a data center would have solar, wind, storage, and if anything's plugged into a local grid, the grid has to be 100% renewable or it doesn't count. That's true net zero, right? And I think we should definitely keep raising the standards of what we mean by net zero or net positive so that the bar is actually meeting the science, not just allow people to say, look, we're neutral because they bought a bunch of renewable energy credits. So I think it's fair to be tough on companies about these statements and make sure they're living up to them. But I don't think we should just jump to, if you're saying that, then you're greenwashing. It just seems too oversimplified. I don't think there's that many companies with the intention to make it look like they're doing something they're not. I think they maybe aren't as knowledgeable as they could be about what it really takes. And that's different than willfully, fooling people.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense what you say, Andrea. I mean, it's like it's a full system change, and maybe sometimes we don't realize about the scope, no? But I mean, guys, I will be here with you all afternoon, all night, all Spanish night, and we would go to have a little fiesta after that. We miss you. I hope to see you soon, face to face. I'm going to do a brief recap now for the session, your session, and the rest of the day. I can just say thank you. It was so short. I want more. I hope to see you soon. Take care, please. From Spain, a big hug from Spanish to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much.
Gracias. So, we've discussed all about net positive with Andrea and Dimitar, how some companies are already working on it, aiming to be on that level 5 of our Sustainable Brands Transformational Roadmap. We spoke about all those new paradigms, governance, constantly seeking a conscious, sustainable model that empowers sustainability and sustainability leaders. We saw that with Interface and the collaboration that Interface has as well with Microsoft. Purpose, we were speaking a lot about purpose, learning from the doing with a clear proof, not go so giant and just give a tangible proof of purpose. Brand influence, we were speaking about brands building powerful relations grounded on values that are fundamental to you, like Tony's, for example, Chocoloni. Innovation, sustainability as a catalyst of transformative innovation with bottom-up experimentation and co-creation like HP Graphic Arts. Supply chain, we just visualize supply chain as a multiplier to do better, and searching for transparent, human-centered supply chains, circular at the start, but ultimately regenerative. While of all that, please remember that you can find the full results of our research from 100 leaders around the world at www.sustainablebrandsmadrid.com. And also, just stay tuned, because next 7th of October, we'll have a next session deepening the house to accelerate sustainability in purpose and brand influence. And in the meantime, just to say thank you, to say stay safe, and please enjoy summertime, and see you back in fall.